Chapter 1228. Yi Qian and his granduncle were looking up at the starry sky as they chatted. Xia Jinyuan, who had gone to the army to meet his old comrade, was also looking up at the starry sky as he chatted with political commissar Yin. The more important Yi Qian is to the military, the more responsibility she will have. I'm just afraid that she won't be able to handle it at such a young age. Political commissar Yin said with a mixture of worry and joy. He then turned to look at the young major who had a bright future ahead of him and joked, "Everyone knows that you have feelings for Miss Jian." Xia Jinyuan felt that there was nothing to hide from his old comrade in Yi Qian. He smiled and said, "Even political commissar knows about it. It seems that I can't hide my feelings from anyone." He didn't deliberately hide it from anyone, not even his parents. He told them long ago, in case his mother, who had a long reach, intervened before he got his girlfriend. He admitted it without any concealment, which made political commissar Yin a little stunned. Then he laughed and said, "You are really honest. In my opinion, it is not so easy to win Jian'er's heart. Even if you really win her heart, there will be changes before you marry her. A smart and intelligent girl would be popular wherever she went. Moreover, Miss Jian had a bright future ahead of her. Those young men with good taste would definitely not miss out on this opportunity." Major Xia had been in the army for many years. Sometimes, he couldn't even find someone he wanted. This undoubtedly gave others many opportunities to pursue Miss Jian. It wasn't impossible for there to be changes in their relationship. Political commissar Yin didn't treat Xia Jinyuan as an outsider and directly reminded him. In fact, the meaning behind his words was very obvious. If he wanted to be with Yi Qian for a long time, it would be best to settle the matter first to avoid complications. There will be changes if I don't marry her, and there will also be changes if I marry her. It depends on the person. Xia Jinyuan's smile spread from the corners of his mouth to the tips of his eyebrows, revealing his reserved confidence. "I'm different from Yi Qian. We will be lovers in the future and will also be comrades. Political commissar, when the time comes, you can wait to attend our wedding banquet." Political commissar Yin was naturally happy to see this happen. He also felt that the two were indeed a good match. The man was handsome and the woman was intelligent. They had known each other for many years and knew each other very well. If they could really get together, they would be happy. "Sure, I'll be waiting for your wedding invitation." As they spoke, they talked about when they would be leaving. Then, they asked about Yi Qian's college entrance examination, as if they were his elders. "When the college entrance examination results are out, Yi Qian and I will leave. It should only take about a week." Xia Jinyuan answered them one by one, and his tone was rather respectful. "Her grades have always been good, and she has a good chance of getting into the National University of Science and Technology. The military is also waiting for her score to be released. When the time comes, there will be a series of arrangements." He didn't directly mention the specific arrangements, but political commissar Yin could tell that Yi Qian's future path would be much smoother than it was now. A gratified smile appeared on his resolute face as he sighed. "Little girl, Jian has finally made it. Even if the days from now on are bitter, she will be willing to suffer. If you really manage to win her heart, you must treat her well and love her. She suffered a lot when she was young, and her mind is sharp. If you do something wrong to her in the future, it will be in vain even if you sincerely repent." At the mention of this, Xia Jinyuan's face became serious, and he said solemnly, "Don't worry, that day will never come." He had seen her suffer. At first, he was attracted by her fearless gaze, then he was interested in her tenacity, and finally, he was surprised by her intelligence. As the days passed, he was attracted to her day by day. By the time he realized his feelings, it was already too late. It was so late that he couldn't restrain himself no matter how hard he tried. He could only let nature take its course. Chapter 1229. Yi Qian was hard to win over, but he had the most say. After her resistance, indifference, and avoidance, and the fact that they hadn't seen each other for almost a year, he finally chose to take the initiative. Now that she finally relented, he felt like he had taken a bullet. How could he bear to let her be sad? The night grew darker, and dark clouds covered the stars in the sky. In the middle of the night, it started to rain, and it didn't stop until 5 o'clock in the morning the next day. Yi Qian, who was used to waking up early, prepared mung beans and plain porridge for Uncle Jin since she couldn't do morning exercises. She was waiting for him to wake up. Old people weren't used to waking up late, and when they heard the rooster crowing, they didn't feel sleepy anymore. When Yi Qian was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, Uncle Jin walked out of the peach forest with a fishing rod and went to the 2 ponds in the middle of the village. It was July, and even at 5 o'clock in the morning, there was still light. Some villagers had already opened their doors and turned on the kitchen lights to start a new day of work. The Yi family's house, which was built in the center of the village, also turned on its lights. Uncle Jin walked past the embankment and looked at the car parked in front of the Yi family's house with a serious expression. It's Sun Yaozu's car. It looks like old Madame Yi is back. No, I can't let her see Unyielding. Uncle Jin held the wooden bucket in his right hand and the bamboo fishing rod in his left hand. He turned around in the rain. Where are you going now? Grandpa Jin, do you have something urgent? The porridge wasn't cooked yet. Yi Qian was surprised to see Uncle Jin in a raincoat. She didn't know that Grandpa Jin had woken up early. She hurriedly took the straw raincoat from the old man and hung it up properly. She glanced at the fishing rod. Grandpa Jin went fishing early in the morning and came back without even loosening the fishing line. Did something happen when he went out? Uncle Jin wanted to hide it from Yi Qian, but he remembered that she was smart. So he said kindly, I just went fishing. Before I reached the pond, I saw Sun Yaozu's car parked in front of the Yi family's house. I thought old Madame Yi might be back. So that's what happened. Don't worry about it. She and Yi Zhixiang offended a powerful person outside and were so scared that they were hospitalized. I'm afraid they came back to avoid trouble. Yi Qian's smile was calm, and there was nothing strange about it. Don't worry. Don't worry about the Yi family. People like them are a waste of time. It's best to ignore them. She did not mention that old Madame Yi had looked for her before and caused a lot of trouble. You've already said that my father isn't her son. When my father was still alive, he had already repaid her kindness. As for me, firstly, I didn't eat her food. Secondly, I didn't use her food. She wants to put on airs in front of me. She really can put on airs. Yi Qian's attitude towards the Yi family was very firm. He would never lower his head to them. After a while, old Uncle Jin gently patted Yi Qian's hand that was supporting him. He looked at the girl who had grown into a beautiful girl who was stronger than her mother with a kind gaze. There was a hint of comfort in his voice. It's good that you think this way. Old Madame Yi is nothing to be afraid of. She's old and doesn't have much time left. It's right not to be calculative with her. You have to guard against Yi Zhifan, but you can only guard against him now. You can't do anything. He's a person who cares about his career. Before you have absolute confidence, you can't act rashly. Otherwise, you'll get yourself into trouble. Chapter 1230. The kitchen in the village was large and covered with black tiles. Smoke rose from the cracks of the tiles when the fire was lit. Yi Jian added 2 pieces of firewood to cook the porridge in the casserole. The fire shone on her face, but the warmth of the fire did not melt the coldness in the depths of her eyes. She pursed her lips and replied softly, I know. They don't dare to mess with me now, and I won't hold on to them. I don't want to waste all my efforts if I can't pass the background check. Uncle Jin, who was sitting in a chair, stared at the girl that he and Chun Dongfeng had trained. He coughed deeply and showed a rare look of seriousness on his face. He looked at Yi Jian, who was trying to hold back her anger, and said with a deep voice, Grandpa Jin still has one more thing to tell you. Little Jian, you have to listen carefully. Before we have any clues, you can't tell me anything, even if it's Major Xia. Yi Qian was startled. Please tell me. Yi Qian didn't even recover from the burning smell of the porridge. Uncle Jin put the casserole aside and looked at Yi Qian, who was still in shock, with pity. I'm a bit confused. Grandpa General, I don't understand. Yi Qian's usually calm voice had a trace of panic. There was too much information, and her head was dizzy. She couldn't make sense of it. Grandpa Jin said that Grandpa Jin and Grandma Yi had entrusted their only son, Yi Xinfan, to old Madame Yi. In the end, old Madame Yi lost Yi Xinfan and replaced him with her father. Before she could digest it, Grandpa Jin threw out another secret. He told her that her mother might have been sacrificed because of that jade pendant. Why was it so messy, so complicated? Even her mother's sacrifice was not simple. No, something was wrong. Yi Qian looked up from her panic and looked at Uncle Jin with her dark eyes. She said softly, "Grandpa, my father passed away in an accident, and my mother sacrificed herself in a mission. Do you remember what old Madam Yi did during that time? Where are Yi Zhixiang and Sun Yaozu? Are they in the village or outside?" It was Uncle Jin's turn to be confused. He thought for a moment and answered, "Your father passed away and your mother sacrificed herself less than 3 months ago. I happened to be in the army. When I came back, your mother's belongings were already in Sun Dongxing and Yi Zhifan's hands. But I'm sure old Madam Yi is in the village. Yi Zhixiang and Sun Yaozu didn't return." "Little Jin, what do you mean by this?" "Grandpa, I suspect that old Madam Yi and Yi Zhixiang had something to do with my father's death." Yi Jian pursed her lips, and her eyes were as cold as the tip of a sword. "I didn't doubt it before. More than 40 days before the college entrance examination, old Madam Yi broke into the school and wanted to forcibly move my household registration. In a fit of anger, I took out my parents' photos. At this point, Yi Qian felt that her throat was as dry as a knife. I noticed that the mother and daughter didn't even dare to look at my father's photo. Yi Zhixiang felt guilty, and old Madam Yi felt lucky. So, I suspect that my father's death was more than meets the eye." Uncle Jin, who is usually emotionless, tensed up when he heard this. 3 months after your father passed away, your mother called me and told me that she was going on a mission. She also told me that if something happened to her, it might have something to do with a piece of jade. Little Jin, when your mother left the village, only old Madam Yi knew. And when your father left the village to work, only old Madam Yi knew. Chapter 1231. In other words, her suspicions were not without reason. Yi Jian, whose eyes were filled with hostility, was in a state of turmoil, but his brain was calmer. "Investigate, I must find out. Even Sun Yaozu must be investigated. I don't believe that a town bumpkin like him could have saved up such a large business." Of course he couldn't. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become a fugitive. Old Master Jin's cold words made Yi Qian's gaze sharpen. "You're saying that Sun Yaozu is a fugitive?" Even after meeting Xia Jinyuan, Yi Qian's expression was extremely cold. She had guessed correctly. Sun Yaozu was a fugitive every time he sneaked back to the village. But now he wasn't. Grandpa Jin said that someone had helped him in secret and removed his identity as a fugitive. Were you thinking about so intently? Xia Jinyuan, who had come to pick her up, saw from the rearview mirror that his girlfriend had a strange expression. Although he was smiling, his eyes darkened. At 6 o'clock in the morning, he received a call from Old Master General. He said that Yi Qian wanted to visit the military base and asked him to drive her home. It was understandable that she wanted to visit the military base. She had deep feelings for the military base in Fujian town. Since she was back in the village, she naturally wanted to visit. But he didn't expect to see this little fox. However, this was a serious matter. Old Master Jin had repeatedly instructed her not to mention it, not even to Xia Jinyuan. Yi Qian forced a smile. "I don't feel good knowing that I can't accompany Grandpa Jin even when I'm back." Was that really the case? Xia Jinyuan didn't believe her, but there must be a reason why she couldn't say it directly. He didn't pursue the matter. He smiled and said, "Grandpa Jin has to wait for Uncle Chun to come back before we can go to the military base together. I think Uncle Chun will be back the day after tomorrow at the latest. At night, you can accompany Grandpa Jin again." Principal Chun needed a hand over the work of the provincial First High School's library. Knowing that Yi Qian would be leaving for the military base in a week, he asked the two of them to drive away first. He would return after handing over the work. If they followed the normal procedure, they should be able to return to the village by noon today. Yi Qian did not want to hide the truth, but he had no choice but to do so. He tried his best to adjust his emotions, and the cold expression on his face gradually relaxed. Fortunately, he had undergone special training, and after adjusting for a while, the coldness from before disappeared. Seeing this, Xia Jinyuan said casually, I really didn't know that I was Sima Zhao. Everyone knows that. Even political commissar Yin saw through me. He kept teasing me last night. He also said that in order to prevent any unforeseen circumstances, it's best to marry you as soon as possible. It was easy to say, but Yi Jian was shy. As she listened, her fair face turned red. She said awkwardly, How? How did the political commissar know? Doesn't that mean Captain Liu also knows about it? Of course. I even promised to send you an invitation when we get married. His 8 characters had just been revealed, but he was already thinking so far ahead. Yi Qian glared at him. Hearing his low voice, he relaxed. The day after tomorrow, Yi Qian waited for Uncle Jin and Principal Chun to come over. He also heard another big news. Yesterday, old Madam Yi suddenly suffered a stroke and collapsed. The hospital said that she would not be able to move her limbs in the future. Her mouth was crooked, and she needed to be taken care of. Yi Jian's lips curled up slightly. This was retribution. However, Yi Qian quickly threw this matter to the back of his mind. The military already knew about her score, and they asked her to pack her luggage immediately. Oh, she didn't even need to pack her luggage. She just needed to take the relevant documents and go with Xia Jinyuan to the naval base in the southernmost part of the country. The first page of a new chapter was opened. Chapter 1232. Shuku village had already become Yi Qian's harbor. Every time he left, he would see Uncle Jin standing at the edge of the village, watching him leave. He missed his hometown even before he left. In the past, Uncle Jin stood alone at the entrance of the village. Now that Uncle Chun was by his side, Yi Qian couldn't help but smile with tears in his eyes. I'm afraid I won't have many chances to come back in the future. Yi Qian wiped away the tears that were about to seep out of his eyes when he couldn't see the 2 elders anymore. He said sadly, I wonder if I can come back once a year? The roads from the village to the town and then to the city were mostly winding roads. Xia Jinyuan's driving skills were good, and he drove very steadily. Hearing this, he smiled and replied, If I told you that you probably won't be able to come back in 4 years, would you be sad? For years? Yi Qian was shocked. He looked at the smiling guy and muttered, I won't be able to come back in 4 years. That's impossible. Soldiers also had family leave, not to mention she was still a student. Although he didn't look surprised, Xia Jinyuan seemed to have seen through him. His smile faded a little. It's possible. I haven't been home for 4 years, too. During winter and summer vacations, my family hasn't picked up a single call from me. Yi Qian's heart sank a little. Captain Xia said that he wouldn't be able to come home for 4 years. Did she have to do the same? Why did she have to do the same? There was a lot of information, so Yi Qian couldn't help but think about it. For a moment, the car was silent. Xia Jinyuan looked at Yi Qian, who was deep in thought, through the rear-view mirror. His thin lips curved up a little. With little Fox's intelligence, she would definitely think deeper into his words. The military had already taken his suggestion and trained Yi Qian to be an all-round soldier king, so that he could smoothly enter the Snowfield Brigade in the future and take over the work of another team. It was extremely difficult for a woman to become a Special Forces soldier. Since Yi Qian had the ability to become a Special Forces soldier, the military would definitely not allow such a talent to be buried in the tide of the army. In addition, Yi Qian was highly regarded by the Army Major General, so it was impossible for her to be mediocre for the rest of her life. Yi Qian's magnificent military career was already beckoning to him. He drove quietly with a calm expression. Yi Jian, who was deep in thought, gradually became serious. She seemed to be thinking of something and looked at Xia Jinyuan thoughtfully. Before she could retract her gaze, the man who was driving calmly looked up and smiled at her through the mirror. His elegant smile was indescribably flirtatious. Yi Qian glared at him before saying, Is it because the military wants to train me to be like you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have said that I might be like you, unable to return home for 4 years. Other than that, she couldn't think of any other reason why she might be like him, unable to return home for 4 years. That was why his little fox was so smart. She could immediately think of the key points after he said a few words. Before the matter was completely settled, everything was unknown. She just wanted to know what to expect. Be mentally prepared that you won't be able to return home for 4 years. At home, there's Uncle Chun taking care of you. If anything happens, I'll inform you immediately. Xia Jinyuan didn't deny it, nor did he confirm it. He maintained a faint smile, and his voice was as cold as jade. I believe you know how high the expectations the military headquarters has for you. Work hard, and I will always be waiting for you in front. When you join the Snowfield Brigade, when you become a true comrade, I'll use the best time to carve out our love. Chapter 1233. Even though he didn't say anything, Yi Qian already knew that the military had the intention of training her to be like Xia Jinyuan. They hoped that she could become a special forces soldier who could fight on the front lines like him. Just thinking about it made Yi Qian's heart surge. Her dark eyes were brighter and brighter than the stars in the midsummer night. Xia Jinyuan's smile deepened. The day of fighting together was not far away. Shuku village was getting further and further away from them. When they reached the town, Yi Qian saw a car with a provincial license plate parked in front of a food wholesaler. 3 familiar figures walked out of the wholesaler with a few red plastic bags in their hands. Yi Jifan, who was walking in front, turned around and said something. Yi Ying's expression immediately tensed up. Sun Dongqing, who was walking at the back, replied angrily. She put an arm around Yi Ying's shoulder and comforted her daughter in a low voice. Yi Qian's cold gaze swept across the family of 3. She narrowed her eyes slightly and asked the man who didn't seem to notice the family of 3, Captain Xia. Old Madam, Yi suddenly had a stroke. Was it Brother Zi's doing? Also, why do I feel that Ying was disqualified from the college entrance examination for 3 years? Ying's actions would only result in a 0 score being disqualified from the college entrance examination for 3 years. Back then, the head of the Provincial Education Bureau said that she would only get a 0 score. Who knew that there would be an unforeseen event that night? She didn't come to the examination hall the next day. No matter how she thought about it, Captain Xia had something to do with it. It had been a week. Xia Jinyuan didn't expect her to ask about it again. He answered vaguely, "Evil will be repaid with evil. Their family can do things that harm others. Sooner or later, they will pay for their actions." After hearing his words, Yi Qian smiled. Her gaze towards Xia Jinyuan became gentler. There was someone who always helped her solve her problems without her noticing. He never said anything. Everything was handled in secret so that she wouldn't be distracted. In this life, with such a person by his side, those cold and damp past events seemed insignificant. Old Madame Ye's stroke was quite serious. She had been staying in the town hospital for the past few days and had not been sent to the city hospital, which was 6 hours away from Fujian town. The situation was too sudden. Even if Yi Zhixiang wanted to send him to the hospital, she couldn't send him to the city hospital when he was sick. I don't know why he suddenly had a stroke when he came back. He was mumbling something that I couldn't hear clearly. Yi Zhixiang's eyes were a little red and swollen. She tucked in old Madame Yi, whose mouth was crooked, and said with a haggard face, "Second brother, I want to transfer Mom to the province to take care of her. The environment in the town hospital is too bad." In one night, her most powerful backer had fallen. Even the arrogant and despotic Yi Zhixiang had become weak. Sun Dongqing looked at old Madame Yi, who could not speak and could not walk. There was an indescribable joy in her heart. She replied sarcastically, "Your house is big, and Mom has been worried about you for a lifetime. It's only right for her to take care of you in the province." She wanted her to take care of him? No way. Second sister-in-law, don't be sarcastic. You're also responsible for Mom's stroke. Don't try to get away with it. Yi Zhixiang had never been kind to Sun Dongqing. Yi Zhixiang, you're the one taking care of her. It has nothing to do with me. You want to blame it on me? No way. Sun Dongqing, who was not to be outdone, immediately retorted, "You used to make things difficult for me. Now that something has happened, you're thinking of me. Yi Zhixiang, do you think I'm still as easy to bully as before?" Chapter 1234. Less than 2 minutes after entering the room, the sister-in-law and sister-in-law started arguing. Although old Madam Yi could not speak or move her legs, her mind was clear. When she heard the argument, she spoke in a hurried and incomprehensible tone. Her eyes were locked on Yi Jifan's face, and her hands, which could still move, were knocking on the bed. She was hinting for Yi Jifan to stop the fight. Yi Jifan glanced at her. He knew that she wanted to talk to him, so he looked at Yi Jixiang coldly. Mom is in this state, and you're still in the mood to argue with your sister-in-law? Sun Yaozu has already made arrangements at the hospital in the provincial capital. I'll take you and Mom there. Who's arguing with her? Did you see that she cared about Mom? Yi Jixiang replied fiercely. Then she remembered old Madam Ye's advice. She raised her hand to brush her hair and softened her voice. Mom is sick, and I'm anxious and angry. Brother, don't take it to heart. Even she knew to lower her head. Yi Jifan twitched the corner of his mouth and said calmly, There's no cure for a stroke. We can only take it slowly and see if it gets better. She can't walk or use a wheelchair, but it's a big deal that she can't speak. Look, I can't even hear what Mom wants to say now. Old Madam Yi, who could not speak, heard him. Her eyes were filled with venom, and her voice became louder and louder. Saliva even dripped from the corner of her mouth. Ying frowned when she saw her stomach churning. She looked away. She did not want such a person in the house. Yi Jixiang held old Madam Ye's hand and took a notebook from the bedside table. She stuffed a pen into old Madam Ye's hand. Mom, write this for Brother Tingrui. Old Madam Yi, who could still move her hands, wrote the word simple on the notebook with trembling hands. Then her gaze fell on Yi Jifan's face. Her face was so ferocious that it made Yi Ying's heart beat faster. I've been busy with Ying going abroad, so I'm not sure about Yi Qian's situation. You and Ji Xiang instigated my wife to cause trouble at the school. Then something happened to her, and you ran back to the village. Yi Jifan said casually. He glanced at Yi Jixiang, whose expression froze, and a hint of mockery flashed in his eyes. Now that something has happened, Jixiang, you take good care of Mom. I'll come back to visit when I have time. This was something Yi Jifan had thought carefully before saying. As for Yi Qian, a vicious look flashed across his eyes. He muttered to himself for a while before continuing. Let's put Yi Qian's matter aside for now. Let's see which school she gets into first. By the time she got into university, it would be too late. Old Madam Yi, who couldn't speak, was so anxious that more saliva flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Her right hand, which was holding the pen, wobbled as she wrote a word that seemed to be broken. Then, she stared at Yi Jifan, waiting to see how he would answer her. Yi Jixiang secretly sighed in relief when she saw that Yi Jifan didn't come after her. She was really afraid of her second brother now. Yi Jifan picked up the notebook and looked at it carefully. Then he smiled faintly and said, Mom, you should ask Sun Yaozu for this kind of thing. He's good at murder and arson. I don't have that kind of ability. Kill Yi Qian? Old Madam Yi was really awe-inspiring. When old Madam Yi heard this, she pounded the bed with both hands. Her cloudy eyes were filled with indignation and anger. She couldn't speak or move. No matter how indignant she was, it was useless. Yi Jixiang was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She glanced coldly at the silent Yi Ying and sneered. No wonder you're not as good as Yi Qian. When something happened, second brother didn't even dare to take responsibility. He only wanted to push Mom to the wall. Now that Mom is no longer here, second brother is really quick to change his mind. Chapter 1235. Yi Jixiang. Sun Dongqing's reaction was intense. She couldn't bear to hear that her daughter was worse than Yi Qian. No matter how bad my daughter is, she's still better than your two troublemaking sons. Don't think you can bully me just because you gave birth to two sons. I'm not afraid of you now. Don't think I'm easy to bully. Second sister-in-law, you're so impressive. Why don't you show off in front of Yi Qian? Look at you. Ying was disqualified from the college entrance exam, and you still have the cheek to talk about my two sons? That's right. No matter how bad my two sons are, they didn't embarrass themselves in front of the school students. Ying was so angry that her face turned pale. No matter where she went, people would make fun of her. Even her own aunt was making fun of her. Sun Dongqing saw that her daughter's expression was not right. She turned into a tigress and pounced on Yi Zhixiang. B asterisk TCH, your two sons are trash like Sun Yaozu. How dare you talk about my daughter like that? Ha, are you guilty? You're hitting me because you're guilty? B asterisk TCH, do you think I'm afraid of you? Yi Zhixiang was not someone to be trifled with. She picked up the foldable chair in the ward and stopped Sun Dongqing, who was unarmed, from moving forward. Yi Zhixiang's smile deepened. If you don't do anything, just wait for Yi Qian to get into a good university. Second sister-in-law, you heard it. Which parent didn't say how good Yi Qian is? Do you think you can send Ying abroad? Do you think you'll be better than Yi Qian once you're abroad? I think even if you send Ying to the best university abroad, she's destined to be worse than Yi Qian. Suddenly, Yi Zhixiang giggled and mocked them even more. I almost forgot. Ying was disqualified from the college entrance exam. It's written on her file. How can the proper universities abroad accept her? Every word she said was like a needle piercing into Yi Ying's heart. While it pierced her heart, it also made the coldness in her eyes thicker. Aunt, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Be careful that the two cousins will become fugitives like uncle when the time comes. You'd better worry about yourself. Don't pass out from anger when you hear that Yi Jian got into a good university. Yi Zhixiang's mouth never had anything nice to say. She would say anything that made people uncomfortable. Yi Zhifan's face darkened. He looked at Yi Zhixiang coldly and said, You played a big part in making Mom what she is today. Am I wrong? Yi Zhixiang snorted. She could tell that no matter how close her mother was to her second brother, the cold-hearted second brother would never be close to her. Sun Dongqing was furious because she wasn't wrong. She glared at her sister-in-law who had never given her a good time for more than 10 years. Sun Dongqing said fiercely, Every dog has its day. Yi Zhixiang, I'll wait for the day when you beg my family. Even now, Sun Dongqing still couldn't accept that Yi Qian was better than Yi Ying. She even comforted her daughter like this after leaving the hospital. Don't listen to Yi Zhixiang's nonsense. Even if Yi Qian takes the college entrance exam, she won't be able to get into a good university. When the time comes, go and give her a good scolding. Don't let her be so brazen. After saying this in the afternoon, she was slapped in the face on the afternoon of the third day. A student from the provincial first high school who lived in the same building went home and told his parents that Yi Qian was the only girl in the province who was admitted to the National University of Science and Technology. He also said that she was not only the top scorer in the province, but also the top scorer in the country. The entire provincial capital was in an uproar. Ying was dumbfounded when she heard this. Chapter 12:36. How was that possible? There must be a mistake. How could that wretched girl be the top scorer in science? There must be a problem. Old Yi, there must be a problem. Call and check. We need to check her score. Sun Dongqing, who had returned home in the provincial capital, could not accept it. How could a wretched girl, who had lived in her daughter's shadow for a long time and was inferior to her in every aspect, achieve such good results? It's fake, it's fake. It must be fake. National University of Science and Technology, no wonder she rejected the direct recruitment of Hua University and Shi University. It turned out that she wanted to get into the National University of Science and Technology, a top military school in the country that counted military service and had living allowances. Yi Ying's angry roar came from the room, followed by a series of clattering sounds. Sun Dongqing, who was throwing a tantrum in the living room, jumped up in shock. The door was locked from the inside, and Sun Dongqing anxiously banged on the door. Ying, don't scare me. It's okay, it's okay. It's fake, it's all fake. Yi Zhifan, who was equally anxious, saw this and pulled his wife away. He shouted angrily, The score can't be fake. She got into the National University of Science and Technology after so many exams. What's the use of throwing a tantrum at home now? Military school. Are we going to be soldiers? Soldiers. Ying, we can be soldiers too. If she's a soldier, you can be a soldier too. It's not a big deal. Sun Dongqing was afraid that her only daughter would take things too hard and her knees would go weak. We can be soldiers. We won't be worse than her. Soldiers? Yi Shifan's eyes narrowed slightly. If they could not find a good school overseas, being a soldier was not a bad way out. Moreover, with his daughter's intelligence, she could also get into the military school and the army. Your mom is right. If you want to join the army, we can sign up in the winter and try to get into the military school based on your results. Yi Shifan was much calmer and could convince Ying more. Dad is also responsible this time. Come out first, we can talk. The door opened, and Ying walked out expressionlessly. Dad, Mom, I don't want to go abroad. I want to be a soldier. Help me find out if I can get into the military school and the army. I'll join the army this year. All right, Yi Shifan nodded. Joining the army was indeed a way out. However, the family of three had forgotten something very important. When Ying was in junior high school, she had gotten a certificate that clearly stated that she had heart disease. According to the physical examination standards for conscripted citizens, patients with heart disease were not eligible for conscription. When Ho Zi, who was in the provincial capital, found out that old Madame Yi had suffered a stroke and had been transferred to the provincial capital hospital for treatment, he also found out that Yi Qian was the top scorer in the national science exam. He called Xia Yiwei, who was no longer as cold to him as before. I heard that Yi Qian got into the military academy and is the top scorer in the national science exam. Sixth brother's foresight was extraordinary. Luckily, sixth brother treats Yi Qian well. He's a little like me. In return, Xia Yiwei smiled coldly. Did he call her whenever something happened? Yi Qian was the top scorer in the National Science Olympiad. Did he still need him to tell him? Sixth brother's surname is Xia, not Ho. Don't flatter yourself. With that, she hung up the phone. It was as if she was tired of talking to him. Ho Zi gripped his phone and smiled bitterly. Once a woman hardened her heart, it was really heartless. Who asked you to think that she will always be your woman? Now that she's not with you, you can continue to shamelessly pursue her. Ho Zi put away his phone and looked determined. He only had Xia Yiwei, and he would only pursue her. Chapter 12:37. After Xia Yiwei hung up, she immediately called Xia Jinyuan. Listening to the airport announcer's voice from the phone, Xia Yiwei said in a deep voice, Old Madam, Yi has suffered a stroke and is in the hospital. Shouldn't you and Ho Zi stop? Xia Jinyuan, who was preparing to board the plane, smiled and said, I stopped a long time ago. You can ask Brother Zi if he stopped. I can't talk to you anymore. Yi Qian and I are preparing to board the plane. You are now. Xia Yiwei's voice came from the phone. Xia Jinyuan's expression was normal as he hung up the phone. He had to admit that the two siblings hung up at a similar speed. Yi Qian, who was walking with a map of China, saw this and frowned slightly. Sister Yiwei didn't say anything. Why did you hang up? Yi Qian, who knew her results, was very calm. After the exam, she knew her results and knew that she would have no problem getting into the National University of Science and Technology. When she heard the exact news, she was only stunned for a second. Hard work pays off. She finally took a symbolic step forward. Now that she had calmed down, she held the map of China that she bought at the airport and looked at it from the north to the south with great interest. It's not convenient for me to say anything about her and Brother Zi. I can only hang up. Xia Jinyuan, who didn't want Yi Qian to know too much, calmly changed the topic. The map only shows 9 sections of the sea in the south. The place we are going to isn't on it. Yi Qian didn't ask further when she heard that it was a personal matter. Her slender finger pointed at the blue area on the map, and she smiled peacefully. Although I can't see it, I know a little bit. I don't want others to ask me about the latitude and longitude of the place we are going to. Li Jinyan doesn't care about superficial things. He only cares about personal results. Xia Jinyuan held her hand and walked into the cabin together. They found a seat and sat down. If you want to know more, let's go to the reference room tonight. The noon flight would take 2.5 hours to reach the airport. Then, they would need to take a 3-hour car ride to reach the port that led to the base. Then, they would need to take an hour to reach the base by boat. They would only arrive at the base at around 7 in the evening. The sky was blue and the sea was magnificent. A few rubber boats brought the first batch of eliminated soldiers back to the shore. When they were a few meters away from the shore, a Navy soldier wearing a tight black diving suit shouted, "Come down, push the rubber boats ashore." The soldiers sitting on the rubber boats looked sick. They looked sickly and weak. Some of their lips were pale and bleeding. Small wounds on their lips were bleeding from the sun. At first glance, they looked quite scary. Hearing the shouts, a few soldiers gritted their teeth and jumped into the water, ready to push the rubber dinghies. There were a few who were not convinced and directly shouted, "We have already been eliminated. Why are we pushing the rubber dinghies? If you want to push, push it yourselves. I'm not doing it." They were eliminated and kicked out of the training camp island without a single chance. Many of his soldiers were still angry. Now that they were asked to push the rubber boats, they took the opportunity to make a fuss. The soldiers who went into the water looked at each other. They pushed the rubber boats with both hands, but didn't say anything. "What? You have a problem because we didn't keep you?" The Storm Amphibian Frogman Commando who spoke jumped directly from the rubber boat into the salty and bitter seawater. His gaze was as cold as the ripples on the surface of the sea, and his voice was as sharp as a blade. "Children playing house? Let go if you're not satisfied. Not bad, you have guts." Chapter 1238. The commando grinned, his white teeth gleaming under the sunlight. "It's pointless if you don't push me. Take care of yourselves." After that, he plunged into the sea, which reached his waist and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye under the shocked expressions of all the soldiers. "He's gone? He's gone. What should we do?" The few eliminated soldiers who still wanted to resist and get off the boat were all dumbfounded. They jumped off the rubber boat one after another, and two of them even tried to chase after him. Someone pulled them back and said helplessly, "We can't catch up. They're real water ghosts. We can't catch up." The mysterious and dangerous deep-sea diving was a common occurrence for real water ghosts. Sometimes, even without equipment, they could dive 15 meters down in an instant without any problem. When they plunged into the water, the speed at which they swam down in 1 second was equivalent to the speed at which they swam out in 10 seconds. It was impossible for them to catch up. "Seems like there's a wave. Quick, push the rubber boat up. Without a water ghost to guide us, none of us will be able to reach the shore." The waves came as they wished, one after another, as if they had calculated the time. For a moment, all of them jumped into the water like dumplings and began to push the rubber boat. At a hidden sentry post on the deserted island, someone was watching everything with binoculars. When he saw the waves coming one after another, and when two soldiers were directly knocked over by the waves, his tightly pursed lips curled into a cold smile. "Get the few people whose names start with D to keep an eye on them. Make sure they don't show up until the rubber boat has drifted 100 nautical miles away." Li Jinyan put down the binoculars and said coldly. He stepped down from his sentry post in his military boots. "Contact the garrison and ask when the last soldier will arrive." The soldiers whose names started with D were the scouting water ghosts of the Storm Commandos. "If you don't see her before the 5 o'clock tomorrow, tell the garrison directly and ask her to return to where she came from." His voice was as cold as the snow on the top of a snowy mountain that never melted all year round. The commandos behind him did not say anything unnecessary and immediately replied, "Yes." In their hearts, they were thinking, "Isn't this a bit too much? Didn't they say that she would only arrive at 7 o'clock at night? It would take another 4 hours to reach them from the base, and there would be big waves tonight. Even if they arrived, they wouldn't have the energy to participate in the training at 5 o'clock tomorrow." The Navy commander had naturally taken this into consideration as well. His gaze shifted from a female soldier whose skin was as white as snow to a pearl-like luster. He thought for a moment before smiling and saying, "Yi Qian, your team leader wants you to participate in the training at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. The training location is about 4 hours away from the encampment. Go get your equipment now and set off immediately." "Yes." Without a word of nonsense, the Marine commander could not help but raise his eyebrows. Xia Jinyuan was expressionless as well. He smiled and said, as expected of the famous Devil King, Even his training style can produce good gold. You have to abide by the rules of whoever's territory you're in. No one can break the rules, and no one can claim to be special. This was the case for the Storm Amphibious Frogman Commandos and the Snowfield Brigade. Xia Jinyuan, who was watching Yi Qian leave, heard the Navy commander say, "He is indeed the sharp knife of our army. The soldiers trained by him are all like gold and can all become sharp knives." Since the army sent Yi Qian to our naval base, as long as she is not afraid of hardship and fatigue, we will definitely not let her down. When the time comes, we will be waiting for you to review the results. The Major General believes in the Devil King's ability. Before I came, the Major General even smiled and said that if there was a chance, he would like our detachment to compete with the Devil King's commandos. How could his little fox be afraid of hardship and fatigue? Looking at her fearless back, he was already looking forward to the results review before school started. Chapter 1239. The station was close to the sea, and the sound of the waves could be heard from the windows of the Navy commander's office. The sound of the waves crashing against the sea gave off an inexplicable sense of excitement. It was 7:30 p.m., and there were still a few rays of golden sunset at the edge of the sea. The sand by the sea was dyed golden yellow, and the ground was covered with fragments of gold. Listening to the voice of his subordinate outside, the Navy commander's gaze dimmed a little. He laughed heartily and answered Xia Jinyuan, "That's fine. It'll definitely be interesting if you two teams have a match." Thinking it was feasible, the Navy commander said with interest, "When Li Jinyan's recruit training is over, I'll talk to him and see if we can have a match. Next year, there will be a match between our Army and a special force of the U.S. military. If we conduct our own training in advance." The Navy commander's hearty voice gradually lowered, and he looked serious. He was obviously considering the Major General's proposal. Does the Major General have any plans or arrangements? Has he proposed to the military? A match between two special forces was not a trivial matter. It required a report and an application, and then it would be approved according to the actual situation. It could only be carried out when the highest-ranking officers of the two armies voted and the military issued the approval. The Major General is also very interested. August to October is the best time for autumn. If you're interested, the Major General can draft a report first. Xia Jinyuan listened to the Navy commander's words with a smile on his handsome face. He said coldly, "As you said, there will be a match between our Army and the U.S. military next year. The U.S. military has always been strong. Since our Army is going abroad to meet the enemy, we can't embarrass our country." Yi Qian had already left with the soldiers arranged by the Navy. They would leave in 10 minutes after receiving their equipment. Xia Jinyuan, who could no longer hear her voice, said calmly, "If you're interested, we can do our best to arrange a match before October." The whistle of gathering by the seaside passed into the office through the open window. After a day of training, the Navy quickly gathered and organized, standing in a horizontal and vertical line square formation at the speed of the sea rain passing through the storm. They neatly and orderly reported their numbers, startling the seabirds that landed on the reef and flapping their wings to fly to the sea. His gaze fell on the naval commander outside the window. His expression was solemn. After a while, he replied, "You're right. If you go, you can't lose face for the country. Since it's possible that you and Li Jinyan will be leading the expedition, you should cultivate a tacit understanding." The Major General has the same thoughts as you, so he wants to have a match before October and wait until the end of the year to have mutual training. Xia Jinyuan's voice also gradually lowered. He mentioned that a certain war that ended in the spring and summer of this year was directly caused by a high-tech war led by the United States at the end of the 20th century. Although the Air Force is the main force in this war, the U.S. Army has also played a critical role in this war. Although the Air Force is the main force in this war, the U.S. Army has also played a very important role. Destruction, assassination. Several ethnic leaders of the Southern Alliance were killed. At the same time, the electricity and communications of the entire Southern Alliance were cut off, and they quickly set up a communication base with the Air Force Base. It's not hard to see the strength of the Americans from this. Let's go over there and learn from them. Chapter 1240. The topic of strong countries, big countries, and weak countries always seemed a little helpless, but they couldn't avoid it because of helplessness. They had to pay attention to it and solve it. The Navy commander patted the young major's shoulder gently, and there was a hint of relief in his solemn expression. With you guys, I believe that all problems won't become a problem. By the way, have you learned about the female soldier you sent? The topic changed very quickly, and the result was already known. They just sighed and used it as a topic to talk about. Xia Jinyuan smiled faintly. Yes, I have. She's a very outstanding female soldier. However, now that she's training under the Devil King, he still has to judge whether she's outstanding or not. I can only say that Yi Qian is a very outstanding female soldier in our team. The Navy commander's smile deepened when he didn't immediately confirm and only expressed his opinion. Don't look at how polite you are. In fact, you're the same as the Devil King. You definitely won't easily say that a soldier is outstanding because your definition of outstanding is quite high. Soldiers with good qualifications are only above not bad and are still a distance away from outstanding. I'm sorry for making a fool of myself. Xia Jinyuan didn't deny or confirm. He maintained a smile and walked out of the office with the Navy commander. Night fell, and the waves reached the sky. Several patrol ships docked at the port of the station shook slightly with the waves. A few Navy sentries stood like white poplars with steel guns in their hands, guarding the borders of the motherland with cold eyes. Xia Jinyuan, who was looking at the sea, heard the sound of the waves. His dark eyes couldn't help but narrow slightly. What kind of ship would send her across such big waves? Just as he was thinking, a Navy lieutenant colonel walked over and saluted the Navy commander. He handed over a folder in his hand. The Ocean Europe has docked at the port and is awaiting orders to depart. Good. The Navy commander took the folder and signed his name on a document for the departure of the special battleship. He said, "The new recruit is an Army soldier. Let the soldiers on the ship take care of her. The waves are a little big, so she might get seasick. Prepare some seasick pills for her first." Xia Jinyuan stood 3 steps away and looked away. He did not look at the document signed by the Navy commander. As the lieutenant colonel left, the commander smiled and said, "Yi Qian will depart in a light combat boat in 5 minutes. Li Jinyan will report his safety when he arrives." The light special warship was an indispensable warship in the Navy. It could cooperate with the coastal patrol boats and rigid inflatable boats. Once the Navy found something abnormal on the sea, it could set off from a forward base and carry out a surgical strike on the target. Yi Qian set off in a light battleship. With the draft of the battleship, he could completely ignore the waves. The light battleships could ignore the waves, but the inflatable dinghies couldn't. The soldiers sitting on the dinghies looked at the vast sea and panicked. Rest first and save up your energy. We'll rotate shifts every 3 hours. Check the ropes. Don't let the waves separate our 3 rubber boats. You guys in front, check the ropes. Arrange for the personnel to rotate shifts every 3 hours. It's only 8 o'clock at night. Don't be in a hurry to go to bed. Bring a diving light and see if you can find something to eat. Otherwise, everyone will go to bed hungry tonight. They had fished in the sea empty-handed during the day and had no harvest. They could only go to the sea at night to take a look. Chapter 1241. He watched as a few soldiers put on diving suits and jumped off the rubber boat. Less than 2 nautical miles away from them, 3 water ghosts quietly emerged from the sea and recorded the names of the first few soldiers. The first batch of elimination did not mean that they had to pack up and return to their original units. The selection of the Demon King never followed the normal process. It had always been the Demon King style to find potential soldiers from the eliminated soldiers. The soldiers selected from various units had been screened in their original units. Their individual comprehensive ability was not bad, but the first batch was eliminated. It was very likely that they did not adapt to the training method, which was why they were a hindrance. Only by carefully observing their coping ability, survival ability, and reaction speed could the final judgment be made. It was like panning for gold in the sand. One needed to be careful. The waves on the sea rose and fell, and the rubber boat went up and down. The soldiers who took turns to stand guard had starlight above their heads. Their eyes were fixed on the boat without blinking. Once they noticed something, they could immediately inform all their comrades. The light special battleship was slightly less bumpy due to the water. Yi Qian, who had changed into a Navy training suit, ate a simple canned meal with the soldiers on the boat and wobbled all the way to the reef island. Yi Qian did not get seasick. She was able to catch up on sleep during the bumpy ride. Her situation was unexpectedly good. The light special battleship docked 15 minutes earlier than expected. Li Jinyan, who was standing by the sea and waiting, suddenly turned around and said to his teammate named Big Whale, "Observe her first, then take her to a single tent to rest. If necessary, test her in the water first. Let me know what's going on." That's not very nice. She's a female soldier after all. How can you give her a show of strength? Big Whale was a little surprised. He softly advised, "Let's be gentle first. The people sent by the army may have some status." Li Jinyan twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled. "No status. I've seen the information. Her mother was a martyr." He decided that he would not change his mind. Looking at the light special battleship that had stopped, Li Jinyan patted Big Whale's shoulder and left with a cold expression. Even Xia Jinyuan thought that the female soldier was not bad. She should not be too bad. It was better to let Big Whale test the water first and see if it was fake. The daughter of a martyr. How do you want me to test her? There aren't many good swimmers in the army, right? The light battleship will stop about 30 meters away from us. Can she swim 30 meters with a backpack? If I go over and scare her into choking on water, Demon King, be careful that the commander will punish you. Big Whale was a little worried. He was not familiar with the new female soldier and did not know how good she was in the water. If he accidentally injured her or let her be swept away by the sea, that would be no laughing matter. Li Jinyan could tell that his team member was treating the new female soldier as an elite soldier. He reminded him calmly, "She's a reserve special forces soldier." It meant, don't look down on others. The whale's expression suddenly turned serious as he nodded. He has some background, but I'm afraid that something might happen. We'll play it by ear. I'll leave it to you. Li Jinyan didn't stay any longer and walked towards the camp for the night. Under the water or on the water? The whale's excited voice came from behind him. Li Jinyan knew that he was still willing to test the waters. Walking under the starry sky, Li Jinyan made a hand gesture, and the whale took off his training uniform. It was as if he had become invisible. Under the starlight, they could only see a vigorous figure plunging into the water. Let's give it a try underwater. I haven't fought with a female special forces soldier before. This is interesting. Chapter 1242. Yi Jian, who was about to get off the ship, said thank you to the Navy lieutenant colonel who was sending her off. Then, she grabbed the waterproof backpack that was issued by the Navy Equipment Department and went into the water directly from the aft deck of the light battleship. Do you see the flashing red laser on the reef? Someone is already there to pick you up. Just swim over. The Navy lieutenant colonel, who connected to the reef island, squatted down and smiled at the female soldier, whose face was only the size of a palm and whose eyes were brighter than stars. It's less than 30 meters away. Just swim over. The light special battleship was different from the air-cushioned landing craft. It couldn't dock on a reef island without a port. It could only dock on the surface of the sea. When Yi Jian came down, she was hit by a wave and fell forward. With her backpack on her back, she could only wave and dive into the sea without saying goodbye. She swam towards the reef island that was faintly visible in the distance. Compared to the nimbleness of the water ghost, Yi Jian's swimming speed was neither fast nor slow. After all, she had also trained by the sea for a month. It was just that her training wasn't as systematic as water ghosts. The land tigers were the snowfield brigade, and the sea dragons were the storm amphibious frogman assault team. As a reserve member of the snowfield brigade, Yi Qian entered the range of the sea dragons. She was warned by Xia Jinyuan to stay alert as soon as she entered the water, in case there was a special welcome ceremony. When a whale entered the sea, it was like a dragon returning to the sea. Every day, he would have sandbags tied to his feet for 5 kilometers of cross-country training. Twice a week, he would swim for 5 kilometers. His feet were very strong in breaking water. With just a few swings of his tail, he could swim 200 meters at a speed that was beyond imagination. When Yiqian surfaced from the water, the light special battleship had already left. Their destination wasn't the reef island, but the reef island that they needed to pass by Li Jinyan's training ground. As the light special battleship left, Yiqian, who was completely wet, swam towards the shore with her backpack. For years of training had allowed Yiqian to remain calm even when facing the unpredictable sea alone. Listening to the sound of the waves, she paddled with both hands and maintained a moderate speed. Using the momentum of the waves, she relaxed her body and swam over. After swimming for about 5 meters, Yiqian's calm gaze suddenly sharpened. He swept his gaze across the surface of the sea about 3 meters to his left. He had been targeted by a water ghost. Fighting in the water was her weakness, and it would be troublesome if she was targeted. However, as Captain Xia said, it suited Li Jinyan's style very well. Yiqian's gaze landed on the big whale as soon as he popped his head out of the water. He was a little surprised. With his diving goggles on, he narrowed his eyes and revealed a deep smile. She was so sharp. He had only just emerged from the water to observe her, but she had already discovered him. He really wanted to applaud her for being so sharp. However, just being sharp wasn't enough. It depended on her underwater reflexes. Compared to on land, the requirements for underwater reflexes were several times higher. The ancient Roman statesman Cicero said, "Whoever controls the sea can control the world." From this sentence, one could see the importance of a country's control over the sea. From this, one could understand how strict the physical fitness of the members of the Frogman Commando team was. The big whale was a qualified water ghost who had undergone strict and systematic training. Yiqian, as an all-round special forces soldier in the army, had already lost the upper hand in terms of geographical advantage against the big whale in the water. However, this wasn't a reason for Yiqian to back down. She opened her inflatable backpack as fast as she could, pulled out her combat dagger, and faced the water ghost who had grabbed her ankle head-on. Chapter 1243. Water and Earth were completely different existences. Although the former could be felt right beside you, it would never give you the sense of security that Earth gave you. Once water surrounded you from all directions, a fatal suffocation would follow. Humanity's deepest fear of nature would also follow. Yiqian, who was holding an underwater combat dagger, twisted his body. The first thing he did was to surface and take a deep breath. Then, he attacked the water demon, who was trying to lock his legs again. With the help of the buoyancy of the water, Yiqian twisted her legs and spun 3 times like a spinning top. She used too much force, and a small whirlpool was formed in the sea water because of her body. Even when his lower limbs were locked, he could still use the strength of his lower limbs to rotate his entire body. This move surprised the whale. Didn't they say that female soldiers were from the army? How did she know the essentials of underwater combat? Fortunately, underwater communication relied on sign language. Otherwise, the whale might have directly asked Yiqian if he had transferred from the Navy to the Army. Yiqian did not give the whale much time to think. When his right leg was free, he raised his leg and kicked his opponent's shoulder with the ferocity of a Special Forces soldier. The results of his endurance running and weight-bearing training showed. Although the water was buoyant, Yiqian's legs were full of strength. His kick landed on the whale's shoulder bone, causing the whale to lean back 2 steps. Using brute force in underwater combat would only increase the speed of exhaustion. The whale was shocked. Yiqian, who had broken free, knew that fighting on land was not going to work. Although he had kicked the water demon in the shoulder, he had also used up a lot of energy. The change in the body's stress points was the biggest obstacle in underwater combat. Without a support point, The water would not only create buoyancy and pressure on a human body, but it would also affect the force exerted by each movement. The lethality of the movements would drop to a frightening level. Just like just now, if they were fighting on land, her kick would definitely have sent the water demon flying. It would not have only made him lean back 2 steps. He had to think of a way. Yi Qian, who had broken free twice in a row, decided not to continue fighting. His face was tense as he quickly swam towards the shore. The whale saw this and laughed in its heart. The female soldier was fast, but she was still far behind them. In the water, it was the water demon's world. In the army, it was always slightly inferior. Behind him, Yi Qian, who was swimming as fast as he could, swam forward less than 2 meters before he realized that he had made a serious and low-level mistake. Wasn't she trying to compete with the water demon in terms of swimming speed? Yi Jian, who had always been rational, realized that she had made a mistake. She quickly came up with a countermeasure. Since she couldn't escape, she could only strike first. When fighting underwater, most of the time, the body would be in a supine or prone position. When fighting with a water ghost that was familiar with underwater combat, the first reason was to quickly change the body's state. Then, how could he change the body's state and find the best point to withstand the force? Yi Qian opened his inflatable backpack and dove into the water, temporarily hiding from the water demon's pursuit. He had no advantage in the water. If he wanted to escape, he needed to fight and retreat quickly. Yi Qian, who was hiding and thinking, started playing hide-and-seek with the whale. The other party did not have any diving equipment. Like him, he could not stay underwater for too long. Also, he had used the lock move just now, which meant that the essentials of underwater combat included a lock. Chapter 1244. This way, Yi Qian could extend to hug, and, starting from the whale's lock technique, Yi Qian's lips curled into a smile as he grasped another technique, grab. Hug the water ghost from behind, lock the opponent, and then grab the attack. On land, there were a series of complicated and changeable moves such as striking, hitting, kicking, locking, and so on. Since he couldn't get hurt in the water, the underwater moves couldn't be complicated. They had to be simple. Once complicated, the consumption of his physical strength would only be greater. Fast, accurate, and ruthless reaction, coupled with the technical moves of grabbing, hugging, stabbing, slashing, hacking, and locking. Yi Qian narrowed his eyes and revealed a faint, bloodthirsty smile in the darkness. Since Demon King Li's way of welcoming her was so unique, she would give a try. In a fight like this, even if she lost, she would lose fair and square. On the other side, the whale was a little panicked at first. The female soldier had suddenly disappeared from the surface of the sea, and he was only wearing a diving suit without any other equipment. If the waves really swept the female soldier away, he would really be a sinner. After searching for about 4 minutes, the whale, who had emerged from the water, suddenly saw a human head about 3 meters away from him. Grabbing Yi Qian's unbuttoned backpack, he raised his eyebrows. "Oh, she's swimming towards me. Don't tell me she's afraid." That's why there was one bad thing about female soldiers. Sometimes, they were afraid of water and the dark. He had tried it just now, thinking that she would be interesting, but in the end, she was still as boring as before. In an instant, the whale's interest was greatly reduced. Since she was in the army, she should just stay in the army. Carry your backpack properly. Don't send a wave a few hundred meters away. We'll have to send more people. Before he could say the words "save you," he saw only the undulating waves on the surface of the sea, and no one was there anymore. Oh no! The whale, who suddenly felt a sense of danger, hurriedly threw his backpack aside and dove into the water like a fish. His reaction was fast enough, but he was still 1 step slower than Yi Qian, who had a plan in mind. His neck was suddenly locked, and the combat dagger, which was still in its scabbard, stabbed towards his spine. The great whale raised his hand and elbowed Yi Qian's waist. Then, he grabbed Yi Qian's arm with one hand and quickly adjusted his balance in the water with his feet. As soon as Yi Qian saw him retaliate, he knew he was no match for him. When he tried to grab his neck, Yi Qian adjusted his balance and reached out to grab Water Ghost's face. If I can't win, then I'll leave a mark. In the cold seawater, the whale felt cold sweat dripping down its back. In just 4 or 5 minutes, she had switched from simply kicking to hugging, grabbing, slashing, and stabbing. He had only managed to escape after a few consecutive counterattacks by relying on the water demon's advantage. Even so, her lumbar spine was still blocked by her unsheathed combat dagger. Sensing Yi Qian's murderous aura, the whale swam back about a meter and said loudly, "Stop, stop, stop. We can go ashore now. Does that mean we don't have to fight anymore?" Yi Qian hugged her backpack tightly. Her voice was as cold as ice as she said in a deep voice, "I didn't lose just now, did I?" The whale wiped the seawater off its face and chuckled. It stretched out its clenched fingers and said with a smile, "No, no. I've offended you on our first meeting. Please forgive me. I'm the great whale. The Demon King sent me to bring you ashore." How is that a loss? Even he was scared witless. Chapter 1245. Hello, I'm Yi Qian. Yi Qian smiled and extended his hand. After a brief introduction, he fastened his backpack and swam towards the shore. It had only been 10 minutes of combat, but his stamina was depleted as if he had run for hours. Even his breathing was a little unstable. On the other hand, the frogman codenamed Big Whale beside him was breathing steadily. Although he had won twice, he would definitely lose in a long battle. Yi Qian narrowed his eyes, but his eyes were full of interest. Captain Xia was right. He could learn a lot by following Demon Kingly. Even though it had been less than 2 months, he had benefited greatly. When he reached the shore, the salty sea breeze blew. Yi Qian, who was completely soaked, did not feel cold. Instead, he felt quite comfortable. The feeling of stepping on solid ground and no longer being surrounded by pervasive water was great. Big Whale, who habitually came ashore, pointed at the dark reef in front of them and smiled. "The camp is in front. The conditions are not very good. Please excuse us when you see them later." He knew how to be polite. Was it because she was a female soldier? Would you say something like that when you see other recruits? Yi Qian asked with a smile. His military boots stepped on the soft sand as if he was walking on clouds. Or is it because I'm a female soldier? She had a murderous aura. Her movements were murderous, and she could react quickly in the water. She could catch the enemy off guard. Such a female soldier, even if she was a female soldier, was still a character. Big Whale bent down and picked up the training uniform he had taken off before entering the water. He laughed and said, "No, no. You're a female soldier, but you're definitely not an ordinary female soldier. I've seen it for myself just now. Not an ordinary female soldier?" Li Jinyan narrowed his eyes and looked at Big Whale, who had returned to report to him. There was a hint of darkness in his cold voice. Other than her quick reaction, what else is different about her? The male soldiers did not live in tents. Even Li Jinyan lived in a simple shed built with plants growing on the reef island. When the solar lights were turned on, it was as bright as day inside. The shirtless whale sat on a rock. His tanned face looked serious as he answered, "She has the same murderous aura as us. I'm sure she must have carried out a secret mission." Not only was her reaction fast, but when I sent her to the tent, I asked her how she thought of hugging my neck from behind. Guess what she said? He wanted to keep Li Jinyan in suspense, but to his surprise, Li Jinyan gently raised his cold eyes. The whale rubbed his nose awkwardly and quickly answered. She said that it was because I locked her legs tightly. She also thought about the problem of underwater strength. She thought that the biggest difference between fighting in the water and fighting on land was that it was mainly simple. She could use hugging to lock her legs, and after hugging her, she still had to grab her. I guess that's the basic point of underwater fighting. He had only locked her legs, but she had thought of many things at once, and she had even hit the nail on the head. Smart. The expressionless Li Jinyan raised his eyebrows slightly. After a while, he said faintly, "No wonder the army insisted on sending her here. I think this female soldier is interesting." Didn't you say that she's not even 19 years old? Why do I feel like she has a few years of experience in the army? Big Whale finally asked the biggest question he had after the fight with Yi Qian. She might have carried out a life-or-death mission. Why does it sound a little? Big Whale deliberated for a while before saying the last words softly. That's ridiculous. Li Jinyan, who had seen Yi Qian's personal information, did not know what kind of life-or-death mission she had carried out, but with her 4 years of Special Forces training, it was not ridiculous at all. Chapter 1246. After a moment of silence, Li Jinyan, who had been judging Yi Qian in his heart, asked again, did she have any expression after reading the training plan tomorrow? The great whale thought for a moment and shook his head. No expression. She only replied, got it. Other than that, she didn't say anything else. Yi Qian, who had undergone strict training, had long been accustomed to military orders are as important as mountains. Even if she had any objections to the training plan, she would not change it at all. At this point, Li Jinyan's cold, handsome face finally showed a hint of a smile, like a gorgeous rosy cloud floating across the top of a snowy mountain. It was so beautiful that it actually gave birth to a gorgeous color. Fortunately, the great whale did not look up. Instead, he lowered his head and guessed Yi Qian's origin. The rosy smile on Li Jinyan's face was like a snowy wind blowing past. In less than a second, it returned to its original expression, no longer showing any trace of it. Yi Qian, who was in the middle of their discussion, had already changed her clothes. She zipped up the tent and looked up at the night sky, where she could touch the bright stars just by reaching out her hand. She looked, and after a while, she closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning. There was no whistle, no call sign, and she had to wake up on her own. Yi Qian, who had arrived 10 minutes earlier, did not appear immediately. She hid behind the reef and observed in the faint light. Last night, the great whale's meaningful gaze before he left made her feel that the morning assembly would not be too simple. Someone stood on the beach with his hands behind his back, standing in the faint light. His figure was vague and mysterious. He was very tall, at least 85 meters. His limbs were slender and well-proportioned. He stood motionless, as if he had been standing there for thousands of years. What surprised Yi Qian was the aura emanating from his body. It was different from Xia Jinyuan's mountain-like aura, which made her feel at ease at first sight. His aura was turbulent and cold, as if a snowy mountain was about to collapse. It was a powerful aura that could devour everything in its path. Yi Qian immediately averted his gaze to avoid being discovered by Li Jinyan. His intuition told Yi Qian that the figure standing in front of him must be Li Jinyan. 3 water ghosts swept across the beach like ghosts. They hugged the nameless tree with their hands and climbed up the tree in the blink of an eye without the help of any climbing tools. The sound of seagulls could be heard from the trees. It was a signal for each other. Yi Qian perked up. As expected, the assembly in the morning would not go smoothly. At 5:07, 5 silhouettes jogged out from the left side. The line was neat and tidy, and there were even chants of 1, 2, 1. They looked quite neat and energetic. Li Jinyan's gaze suddenly darkened. He raised his hand slightly, and several figures suddenly rushed out from all directions. They piled on top of a few people at lightning speed. Are you kidding me? A sneak attack so early in the morning. Do you still want to train? Is it interesting? Is it interesting? 2 people in front were still able to resist. They said a few words before their mouths were covered. The other 3 Navy soldiers were directly pressed down on the beach. A murderous roar came from above them. Shut up, all of you. Otherwise, you'll eat a mouthful of sand. Yi Qian, who had witnessed everything, sighed softly. Suddenly, his hair stood on end. He rolled forward twice in a row to avoid the sneak attack from the people on the reef. The water ghost leaped down from the reef and let out a small cry of surprise, expressing all sorts of meanings. Chapter 1247. First, what a fast reaction speed. Second, the figure was unfamiliar. Third, female soldier. Fourth, female soldier from the army. The water ghost smiled when he sensed a female soldier hiding in the dark. The Demon King said that you can watch for the sidelines for the time being. There's no need for you to participate. With that, he disappeared from Yi Qian's sight with one hand on the reef. Yi Qian, who was kneeling on the ground with one hand on the beach, pursed his lips tightly. He had only glanced at him for a moment, and he had noticed it in less than a second. There were still 4 minutes before the assembly at 5 o'clock. The first batch of 24 Navy soldiers was treated to an early morning appetizer by a group of water ghosts. One by one, they were cleaned up neatly. Within 10 minutes, all 24 soldiers were piled on top of each other. One by one, they crawled up with their heads covered in dust, puffed out their chests, and gathered quickly. Yi Qian had already blended in and was standing at the very end of the first row. She was a new recruit, so there was no mistake in standing there. Li Jinyan's gaze slid past her face. His icy, cold voice pierced through the sea breeze and reached Yi Jian's ears clearly. "What are you talking about? Warm-up exercise is over. Let's start the formal training." He really didn't have any superfluous words. He didn't even think about introducing Yi Qian. He pointed at the equipment 3 meters away. Equipment, 2 points. They only had 2 minutes to change their equipment. After a month of hellish elimination training, the remaining 24 soldiers rushed over without panting. They began to change their equipment and put on their shoes. The shoes weren't ordinary shoes. They were specially made for frogmen with iron sand added to their feet. "Put the shoes on." A water ghost wearing a training uniform reminded them and retreated to the side. He stared at the stopwatch, ready to shout for them to stop at any time. Yi Qian put the shoes on and realized that there was something wrong with the shoes. He tied the laces and lifted one foot to test the weight. One shoe was about 2 kilograms. 2 shoes weighed 4 kilograms. Wearing a pair of shoes that weighed 4 kilograms and had to run 5 kilometers around the reef island cross-country. The cruelty of the frogman training was evident. The situation is not bad. For the time being, his speed seems to be on par with the male soldiers. However, in terms of endurance, I'm afraid that he is slightly better. The water ghost, who had been observing along the way, reported the situation to Li Jinyan. Most of the time, his gaze was on Yi Qian. The frequency of his breathing is maintained well. There's not much sluggishness in his knees when he bends and raises his feet. As a soldier who is suddenly parachuted in, and a female soldier at that, Yi Qian did not undergo the first few basic PST screening tests for the Storm Commandos. Naturally, she became the focus of observation. Li Jinyan's understanding of Yi Qian came from the Army's written information. To him, this information was only about her personal performance in the Army. No matter how outstanding her performance was, it didn't mean that she would be outstanding in the Frogman unit. Even after listening to the Great Whales report last night, Li Jinyan still maintained his original attitude. He had to go through training before he could confirm whether Yi Qian was qualified and whether he could stay. Demon King, there's news from Big Eel. 3 soldiers can return to the selection competition. A soldier wearing a Navy uniform walked over and saluted with a smile. Big Eel and the others have brought them back. However, the rubber dinghy drifted a little too far away. They need to be brought back by the patrol boat. The main thing is that they have to bring back Big Eel and the others, who are fully equipped. Otherwise, it will take them a day to swim back. Chapter 1248. Li Jinyan looked at his watch and said to the comrade who reported the situation to him, "Check her physical condition at the port first. Send her back to the reef island before 8 o'clock tonight." "Okay, I'll contact Big Eel right away." The comrade with the code name Big Shark stood on his tiptoes and glanced at the folder in Li Jinyan's hand. He asked with a smile, "Last night, Big Whale came back and told me that the female soldier from the Army has some skills. How do you plan to train her?" "Female soldier? Didn't our team say that we don't recruit female soldiers? Why did the commander agree? Did they sign a life and death contract? Our team has been established for less than 2 years. Demon King, you have to take it easy." He was afraid that he would be too ruthless and accidentally kill her. After all, Everyone knew that female soldiers had weaker resistance to pressure than male soldiers. Their body and bone endurance were also worse than male soldiers, especially in deep diving areas that were more than 100 meters deep. The difference between the psychological quality of men and women was even more obvious. Female soldiers often had huge psychological pressure due to the special underwater environmental factors. Their emotions would become unstable, and once they panicked, serious diving accidents would occur. It wasn't that such a thing hadn't happened before. It was precisely because there were real cases around that the Great Mermaid was worried. Li Jinyan simply handed the folder to his comrade so that he would not have cramps. After the morning training, take her for a checkup to see if there are any problems with the ventilation function of the eustachian tube. Also, check her tolerance and adaptability to hypoxia and high C02. After the morning training, Big Shark did not refuse. He took the folder and looked at it. As he spoke, he lowered his head and opened the folder. His face immediately showed surprise. Wow, this resume is beautiful. She started training in the second year of junior high. She still played special forces training. When I was in the second year of junior high, I was still thinking about how to climb a tree and dig out a bird's nest. Huh? Why didn't it say who trained her? How could she do special forces training without the guidance of an expert? Went abroad to participate in the Mathematical Olympiad, individual gold medal. Wow, high IQ. Familiar with all kinds of guns and ammunition, blindfolded and reassembled all kinds of guns, sniper background. Big Shark's eyes widened as he read. When he reached the last paragraph, he closed the folder and stuffed it back into Li Jinyan's hands. He pretended to wipe his cold sweat and said with lingering fear, "What a scary resume." What was even more frightening was that he was the nation's top science scholar. After all this time, she was still a student. No wonder you didn't want to show it to us. Just looking at it makes me feel weak. She didn't study for the first year of high school and went straight to training. Plains, snowy mountains, deserts, oceans, jungles. Oh my God, there wasn't a place that she hadn't been to. She had walked further than him. How valiant and strong this female soldier must be. Could it be that her gender was female and her height and appearance were both male? Looking at such a frightening resume, it was not impossible. Somehow, the Big Mermaid was a bit worried. Female soldiers who looked like men would easily forget her real gender. What if they forgot her gender one day and took off their clothes in front of her? Wouldn't that be too awkward? After thinking about it, he wiped his face and said, "It seems that the army is focusing on grooming her, which is why they sent her to you. Demon King, we can't serve such a person in our team." It was obvious that the army wanted to train Yi Qian, but what the army wanted to do had nothing to do with Li Jinyan. He only knew that she could only listen to the Navy's arrangements. Chapter 1249. Her CV is beautiful, but that's only because of her performance in the army. Now that she's in the Frogman unit, no matter how complicated her previous experience is, she'll have to start all over again. Li Jinyan looked at the time again. He turned on his earpiece and took over the water ghost communicator. "How's the situation, Big Shrimp?" After the electromagnetic buzzing sound came from the earpiece, a rough voice said, "She's maintained her original speed. Her breathing rate is normal. She doesn't feel any sluggishness when she raises her feet. Demon King, why didn't you tell me that Yi Qian is quite beautiful? We met face to face a minute ago. I was dazzled. She's even more gorgeous than a coral reef." It was a characteristic of the water ghost to be able to describe a person's beauty with the colorful color of a coral reef. Li Jinyan had never cared about whether a woman was beautiful or not. Before the army sent the information over, there wasn't even a picture. When they gathered, it was still dark, so he couldn't see what she looked like. He only felt that she was too slender and didn't match the experience on her CV. Keep a close eye on her. We'll see if she's good or bad today. If she doesn't succeed, send her back to the base tonight. It was still the same sentence. The good ones should stay, and the bad ones should leave. They should stay in their original units and be honest soldiers. Don't even think about joining the Frogman assault team. Li Jinyan's requirements for selecting his teammates were absolutely harsh. He wasn't deliberately making things difficult for them. He was being responsible for the responsibility on his shoulders. It was also being responsible for the lives of his teammates. He didn't want to see any sacrifices. Even if he knew that sacrifices were inevitable, he would do his best to prevent his comrades from being sacrificed so that they could continue to serve their country in the future. He also didn't want to see anyone take advantage of the situation. That was blasphemy to the country, disrespect to the army, and contempt for life. Yi Qian knew that she was being watched closely by the water ghosts. Wearing the special shoes filled with iron sand wasn't a difficult task for her. From the first day of sniper training, she had a metal ball hanging from her hands and sandbags tied to her legs. In the end, she had to run back and forth around the training ground of Fujian Town's recruit camp. She had to stand still under the scorching sun, heavy rain, and snow for 4 hours while holding a sniper rifle. However, the feeling of jogging with sandbags tied to his feet was different from jogging with the special shoes. The biggest difference was that the soles of the special shoes were very hard. Running around the reef was either sand or stone. When lifting one's feet, one had to exert a lot of strength, and it consumed a lot of energy. After running for about 40 minutes or so, the distance between the soldiers and the distance between them and the last soldier, Daxia, who was in charge of keeping a close watch, touched his chin thoughtfully. He contacted Li Jingyan, who had never been interrupted. Demon King, is that female soldier hiding her true strength? 40 minutes later, she still maintained the same distance between them. Now, other than her breathing becoming rapid, nothing else has changed. 5 years of training can't be fake. She has the ability that you can see. Li Jingyan and a few other platoons were preparing a meal. There was only seafood around the island, and the meal they prepared was a seafood feast. According to the price outside, a meal would cost at least 2,000 RMB. He used a combat dagger to slice a fatty fish into thin slices and place them on top of a large shell. The raw snail meat was placed on top of the shell. When the 24 Navy soldiers and Yi Qian returned, they would be able to serve the seafood feast. In order to train their will to survive and adapt to the pace of the frogmen's training and life, there was no cooked food on the island other than drinking water. There wasn't even a biscuit. They had to rely on themselves. As for starting a fire, that was even more impossible. Chapter 1250. The training of the Storm Commandos was the same as the training of the Snowfield Brigade. It was top secret from its formation to its establishment. Even this batch of Navy soldiers only knew that they would become frogmen and that they would be trained under Li Jingyan, who was known as the Demon King in the Navy. They did not know that once they stood out, they would become the sharp knife of the Navy. Our country's military power had always been discreet and would not easily reveal its strength. Especially after the Southern Alliance War this year, we once again learned of the military power of the Western countries. Our country did not dare to let down our guard. The Western countries had the SEALs, so our country needed the Storm Commandos. The Western countries had the Alpha Special Warfare Special Forces, so our country had the Snowfield Brigade. How many other unknown special forces did the Western countries have? Our country also had unknown special forces. Everything was done in secret. Even if it was just a selection, it was done in secret. For example, the Storm Commandos had 3 meals a day made from local ingredients. When they left, they cleaned up quickly and did not leave any traces. Before they left the reef island, they wouldn't be able to do anything big like starting a fire. Time ticked by, and a red sun slowly rose from the horizon. Its radiance illuminated the entire surface of the sea, and the blue waves connected to the sky. White waves chased after the clouds. This was the sea region of our country. Just like the mainland, it also needed to be protected and could not be invaded by other countries. The morning breeze blew across the surface of the sea. Before the first wave subsided, the waves kept crashing against the black reef that had stood there for God knows how many years. At the end of the reef, a figure jogged over. With tenacity, she gradually appeared in front of the water ghosts who were preparing breakfast. The water ghost who was on sentry duty at the front softly exclaimed. He pressed on his earpiece and quickly reported, There's an unexpected situation. Demon King, the female soldier who came last night, was first on the first day without saying a word. As soon as he finished speaking, Prawn, who had been secretly observing, said excitedly through the earpiece, "Demon King, did you see the female soldier over there? Amazing. She left the male soldiers a few hundred meters behind in an instant. 5,000 meters with 4 kilograms of weight on her feet in 50 minutes. She only used 5 minutes to catch up with the male soldier running at the front. She used another 5 minutes to completely overtake all the male soldiers. Demon King, this female soldier is not only beautiful, but her skills are also beautiful." Li Jinyan, who was slicing sashimi, paused. He immediately looked forward. His cold expression changed slightly. A hint of surprise flashed across his cold black eyes. She was 10 minutes earlier than he had expected. She was only 15 minutes slower than the water ghost's training speed. Yi Jian's training speed was only 15 minutes slower than the water ghost's. One should know that before this, Yi Jian was an army soldier. All her training and equipment were related to the army. She had nothing to do with the Navy at all. Moreover, the water ghosts had already undergone 1.5 years of training. It only took them 35 minutes to run a 5-kilometer, 4-kilogram, 2-footed cross-country run. It was her first time here, yet she could achieve such a result. It was indeed impressive and finally, I didn't hear you say you want to chase her away. The big shark laughed. He even whistled happily. He had said last night that the female soldier sent by the army was not bad. See, he was right. Chapter 12:51. The slender figure was getting closer and closer. Her facial features gradually became clearer until she stood straight in front of Li Jinyan. She raised her hand and saluted. Yi Qian, reporting, completed the 5,000-meter cross-country run. The group of rough-sitting water ghosts looked at each other. Then they slightly closed their legs together in a reserved manner. A faint smile appeared on their faces as they lowered their heads and silently prepared breakfast for the soldiers who hadn't arrived yet. Dozens of men had an unusually large appetite. They did not have rice, noodles, or dumplings to fill their stomachs. They only had sashimi and snail slices. It was easy for them to get hungry and feel nauseous. Li Jinyan's first reaction when he saw Yi Qian was not to answer. Instead, he glanced at all the water ghosts like a cold arrow. When he saw that they were all obedient and did not look straight at her, he calmly retracted his gaze. Just as the Xia had said, the new female soldier Yi Qian was indeed beautiful. The most beautiful thing about her was her eyes, which were as bright as the morning star. He raised his hand and saluted Yi Qian back. His voice was cold and monotonous. "Return to the team and rest." "Yes, sir." Yi Qian, who had been staring straight at him, simply turned around. She changed her special shoes to one side and looked around. When she saw a familiar figure, she walked over with a smile. "Big Whale, is there anything I can help you with?" After breakfast, they rested for a certain amount of time before diving into the 500-meter deep water. The water ghosts, who were all wearing tight black rubber diving suits, saw Yi Jian walking straight to the whale from the corner of their eyes. A few of them coughed a few times as if their throats were itchy. Li Jinyan's cold gaze swept over them. When he saw the fake coughing water ghost, he shrunk his neck and silently stared at the task at hand. Preparing breakfast. "You know me? How did you know?" The big whale was no less surprised than his comrade. Hearing the meaningful fake cough, he hurriedly stood up. It was broad daylight, and he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. In the end, he put them on his lower abdomen. Cough, at least he could block it. When the female soldiers arrived, for the first time, it was not the female soldiers who were embarrassed. Instead, it was the male soldiers who were wearing tight-fitting diving suits. The suits showed off their figures too much. All the men were embarrassed. With a slight smile on his face, Yi Qian did not seem to notice the whale's movements. He smiled and said, "Judging from your figure and the way you looked at me when I came over just now, it was as if you were looking at someone familiar. So, I guess you must be the whale. Have a seat." If you need anything from me, just let me know." As he spoke, he pulled out a combat dagger from his waist and pointed at the giant clams that had not been pried open. "Do we need to pry open these two?" "Oh, yes, yes. If you're hungry, you can eat first." As expected of a female soldier with a high IQ. She did not even see DeWale's face last night, but today she could tell that he was DeWale based on his figure and eyes. Her observation skills were very strong. DeWale watched as Yi Qian skillfully cut open the giant clams. She did not peel off the whole clam to remove the inedible parts, leaving the white and fresh clam meat. She slowly cut the clam meat with the dagger in her hand. Then, she cut off the bottom of the clam meat horizontally. A giant clam was finished in less than 2 minutes. This method of cutting is rare. DeWale thought it was interesting. There was no need to cut it into slices. Instead, she cut into circles. When she ate, she could lift one end of the clam meat and eat it like noodles. I want to learn this method too. It can be useful in the future. Where did you learn it? Don't underestimate the conversation. At this moment, DeWale had already started to ask questions. Chapter 1252. The best and most direct way to understand a person's situation was to chat. It seemed like a normal conversation, but as long as the other party could answer your question, even if the other party only said a few vague words, you could get the information you wanted. Without a doubt, the great whale was a water ghost who was good at chatting. He first praised Yi Qian to create a kind impression. Then he laughed and changed the topic to why Yi Qian was so good. It must be because he had similar training in the past. Otherwise, how could he handle these giant clams? Most importantly, his questions were rough but detailed. He only asked how Yi Qian was able to handle the giant clams and didn't mention training at all. It was impossible to tell that he was asking about Yi Qian's personal situation. When Yi Qian heard this, his eyes narrowed slightly, but the smile on his face didn't change. He answered casually, "I used to play by the sea for a while and stayed on a deserted island for a few nights." The calm answer made the great whale laugh. The female soldier was very alert. Her answer was the same as not answering at all. She even told him that she knew what he wanted to ask. "Forgive me, I'm used to it." As he spoke, his laughter became softer. He moved closer to Yi Qian and said softly, "We can find out whatever we want from that group of soldiers who ran over. Our captain was so angry. I don't know how they were taught in the original army. They don't have any sense of confidentiality. Unlike you, you know what I want to do the moment I open my mouth." The great whale was a native of the sea. His skin was tanned and had a metallic luster in the faint morning sun. When he laughed, his white teeth flashed, making Yi Qian think of the great white shark of the deep sea. If he was careless, he would be bitten and unable to escape. When you open your mouth, I feel like there are traps everywhere. Yi Qian, who was slicing the fish quickly, cut the white and tender fish slices until they were as thin as cicadas' wings. He didn't even have to look at the fish. When he raised his head and spoke, the fish slices were cut and his words were finished. The dagger used in combat inadvertently swept past the great whale's eyes, leaving only a faint smile in her eyes. The great whale suddenly felt a chill in his heart. It was true that the female soldier was beautiful, but she was a poisonous flower with thorns. He couldn't touch her. There was no point in continuing to ask. He believed that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. The whale, whose intentions had been exposed, did not look embarrassed at all. He replied calmly, "Not at all. I just want to know more about you since we'll be training together in the future." Yi Qian smiled, but did not say anything. Coincidentally, the male soldiers who had fallen behind her came back one after another. The great whale stood up and said, "I'll go over and take a look." You don't have to finish everything by yourself. Ask them to come back and get some. You can't let the male soldiers do whatever they want. They'll just take advantage of the situation. The rest of the frogmen looked at each other and had a new understanding of the new female soldier. Big Whale was the team's informant. There was nothing he couldn't find out, but he had never left empty-handed like this. The female soldiers sent by the army for training could not be underestimated. Yi Qian didn't care what kind of impression her arrival would leave on the water ghosts. She only knew that she didn't like being questioned at all. Once there were signs, They had to be strangled to death from the start. Demon King, things aren't settled yet. The great whale, who had found an excuse to leave, came to Li Jinyan, who was sitting on a reef and looking out at the sea. With a serious expression, he said, "She also warned me. She used the combat dagger in her hand to tell me that she doesn't like me asking around." Chapter 1253. The sun had completely risen above the surface of the sea, and the waves were sparkling under its light. It was as if there were boats passing by on the coastline, and they could faintly hear the sound of sirens from the reef island. Li Jinyan looked indifferent for a long time before he opened his mouth and said, "She was sent here by Xia Jinyuan himself. If he can get information out of her so easily, he won't think highly of her." His words shocked Whale so much that he almost fell off the reef. "Xia Jinyuan personally sent her here? Devil King, are you kidding me?" Whale's serious expression instantly changed to one of shock, and he said in a wrong tone, "You and he fought to the death in the past, and we were neck and neck. You knew that she was brought here by him. So how could you bear to let me ask for a rebuff?" He wanted to cry. "Even if you want to trick your comrades, you shouldn't do it like this." Who was Xia Jinyuan? He was the only person who the Devil King had acknowledged as a strong opponent. The only person who had publicly said that he had no confidence in winning against him. As for himself, sigh, it was better not to mention him. He was defeated by Xia Jinyuan. Although he was no longer in the water ghoul team, there were always traces of his existence. The great whale heaved a long sigh and rubbed his chest. His voice sounded a lot older than before. "My chest is stuffy. I'm so embarrassed. I don't have the face to see her." Last night, he had volunteered to find out if there was anything about the female soldier that wasn't written in the information. He had even thought that he was smart enough to ask her about her skills in cutting giant clams, and whether she knew a high-ranking naval officer. After being seen through, he still didn't give up and asked if she had such a strong sense of confidentiality. Had she read their information in advance? The topic continued to circle back to the previous inquiry. Because of the female soldier who could see the information of the Storm Amphibious Frogman assault team, even if the information said that her mother was a martyr and her background was nothing special, he would not believe it was true. She knew everything about the two tests, and to be honest, he was a little embarrassed at that time. At the same time, he felt embarrassed that he had displayed his slight skill in front of an expert. When the last two soldiers returned, Li Jinyan, who had jumped down from the reef, replied calmly, "You were so enthusiastic last night that I didn't have the heart to discourage you. It just so happens that I also want to see how powerful the female soldier sent by Xia Jinyuan is. Since you volunteered, it saves me the trouble of finding someone else." He almost vomited blood. The whale felt its chest tighten even more. Li Jinyan's eyes darkened. He needed to reassess Yi Qian's position. It could be seen that her physical fitness had already surpassed the 24 soldiers who had entered the second batch of eliminations. It just so happened that physical fitness was the most important stage for the frogmen and played a very important role in their training. Through the analysis of the soldiers' physical fitness, they could make a preliminary judgment on whether the soldiers were suitable to stay and continue training, and whether they could continue fighting fatigue. This was the most basic entry. Today, it could be seen that Yi Qian's physical fitness was on the high side and met his basic requirements. However, he couldn't be completely sure whether she met the requirements. After all, it was only her first day of training, and her body was in an excited and energetic state, while the male soldiers had been training for more than a month. The shrimp, who was in charge of observing, trotted over. He was also cross-country with the frogmen, and his face was very inconspicuous. He looked a little like a fisherman who made a living out of the sea. When he ran up to Li Jinyan, his calm eyes suddenly changed. From an ordinary fisherman, he became a real naval soldier. Camouflage was also a skill that all water ghosts had to know. Chapter 1254. Li Jinyan stopped in his tracks when Prawn came over. He glanced coldly at Yi Qian, who was chatting with his teammates, and signaled for Prawn to follow him to a secluded area to talk. "Demon King, I suspect that Yi Qian has undergone very strict training. I'm afraid that none of the 24 soldiers are her match, Prawn said in a deep voice. Her stamina is very good. She didn't even stop to rest for a second during the cross-country run. Prawn said in a deep voice. His admiration for Yi Jian was evident in his tone. Also, she is very familiar with the terrain and landscape. She knows very well which way is the fastest and which way is likely to take a detour and waste her time. My opinion is that she shouldn't be a burden. She might even be able to surpass the 24 recruits. A 5,000-meter cross-country run had once again shown one of the water ghosts how strong Yi Qian was. Li Jinyan's cold and handsome face revealed a hint of contemplation. He said to Prawn, "We can't rush to a conclusion yet. Later, we still have to do a hypoxia and high C02 endurance test. After these two tests, we can decide whether she can stay or not. It's better to play it safe. After all, she's a living person in our team. We can't let anything happen to her." Yi Qian, who was chatting with the water ghosts, didn't know that she had become the topic of conversation for the Storm Amphibious Frogman Assault Team. At this time, she was answering a question from a Marine. "I'm not a recruit. I often train with weights on my legs, so I don't feel much when I run." Didn't they want to know where she came from and who she was trained under? Then she might as well tell them openly and let them guess for themselves. Whale, who had already walked over, happened to hear this sentence. He stopped in his tracks and smiled bitterly. This was great. For the rest of the training, he wouldn't be able to talk much in front of Yi Qian. "Why aren't you going over? Are you done eating?" Big Shark, who had come to Yi Qian for hypoxia training, patted his comrade's shoulder. When he saw the bitter smile on his comrade's face, he asked, "You don't look too good. What problem did you run into?" The Great Mermaid was the team's instructor. She observed every word and action of her comrades and solved any potential problems at any time. He was the only one in the team who could give his opinion to Li Jinyan at any time and had the right to make decisions. "I thought I was smart in front of Yi Qian. I feel a little embarrassed." The great whale sighed and shook his head. "Great Mermaid, do you think I should apologize to her?" The Great Mermaid raised her eyebrows and asked him calmly, "Do you still have any thoughts of looking down on her now?" No, not even a little bit. I was scared by her." His words made the Great Mermaid laugh. "That's right. If you don't agree with her, you can test Yi Qian's strength yourself. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll have to discuss her background again. The Demon King deliberately arranged it because he heard you, Prawn, and the others say something you shouldn't have said. It just so happens that he also wants to know Yi Qian's strength, so he sent you guys there. She's strong, so it's good that you guys don't look down on her. If she's weak, you can ask her to go back." Whale's face was red as he scratched his head. His face was full of embarrassment. "I have to apologize to her. Otherwise, I'll lose the integrity of a soldier. You're a soldier who dares to take responsibility for your actions. It's only right that you apologize. But let me tell you first." Big Shark was only a few meters away from Yi Qian when he spoke. When he looked over, he saw that she was already looking in his direction. Chapter 1255. Yi Qian had already stood up. Her instincts told her that the middle-aged man walking towards her could be one of the people in charge of the team. His position in the army was second only to Li Jinyan. Otherwise, the whale would not have consciously fallen half a step behind her. When the water ghosts who were talking to the whale saw the Great Mermaid coming over, they quickly lowered their heads. Their expressions were especially serious. They did not remind Yi Qian of the Great Mermaid's identity. The Demon King did not introduce Yi Qian this morning. There seemed to be a deeper meaning behind it. Even when they were chatting just now, they did not mention their code names. The soldiers who had eaten a mouthful of fish stood up and smiled. "Vice Captain, do you have any orders for us?" "Vice Captain, I'm panicking when I see you smiling so happily. Just say what you want to say. Don't make me laugh in the middle of it. I really can't take it if you suddenly magnify it," said a soldier from the northeast. He was also the only northerner in the team. The Great Mermaid patted him on the shoulder and laughed. Good. Don't change the training later. 500 meters arm swim. Eat more, or you won't have the strength to swim." "Then I'm relieved, The northeast soldier was finally relieved. Ever since he came here for the Frogman selection, he had been living in fear every day. He was afraid that something would happen. His heart could not take it. He was not the only one who heard it. The other 23 soldiers all heard it. They all breathed a sigh of relief in unison. It was the vice captain of the Storm Brigade. Yi Qian, who had a slight smile on his face, looked at the middle-aged man who was chatting with the soldiers and walked up to him. "Vice Captain, hello. Little Yi, you did well this morning." The big mermaid, who looked more mature and capable than the group of young soldiers, looked at Yi Qian with a pair of bright eyes. She didn't lose her friendliness at all as she said, "What you did has truly stunned us. Very few female soldiers are as capable as you. Vice Captain, you flatter me. I just started a few years earlier, so I have the advantage in terms of time. If I only had half a year, I wouldn't have been able to run even if I wanted to." As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers and water ghosts who were chatting with Yi Qian just now all laughed kindly. "Vice Captain, the female soldier has arrived. You can't be biased because of this." "Shoo, shoo, shoo. Does Yi Qian need to be biased? She's been in the army longer than us. Amazing. You guys better hurry up and eat your fill. The Demon King is waiting for you in front." The Great Mermaid, who is usually kind, smiled. After she finished speaking, she saw a hint of respect on the faces of the soldiers. She couldn't help but smile even more. Yi Qian, on the other hand, found it interesting. His vice captain had an amiable personality, which complemented the cold-faced Li Jinyan. "Little Yi, come here for a moment. There's something I need to discuss with you." After talking to the soldiers, the Great Mermaid lowered her voice and said to Yi Qian, "You can't directly participate in water-related training for now. Come with me to do 2 tests first." Yi Qian, who was mentally prepared, nodded slightly and left with the Big Mermaid. "Hypoxia and high CO2 are essential tests for us. Before you came here, you should know that the danger of frogmen is different from that of the army. We're carrying out a mission in the water. The moment we enter the water, it's the same as having 1 foot in the door of hell. While we're diving in the deep sea, there's the danger of crushing our lungs and drowning at any time. If the soldiers have outstanding hypoxia and high CO2 resistance, even if it's only for 30 seconds, there's still a chance of survival." As she spoke, she brought Yi Qian to the back of the reef island. They stepped onto a small path that led to the other side of the island. Chapter 12:56. The two in front talked as they walked. They didn't seem to notice that there was a living person following them. They didn't even look back as they walked from the front to the back of the reef island. When they reached the back of the reef island, the vice captain pointed at a black reef island that extended into the sea. She smiled at Yi Qian and said, "We have to go to the front. We need to wade in the water. Be careful when you go in. Be careful not to slip." Okay. Yi Qian knew that he was undergoing a training test. He didn't ask any questions and just followed the vice captain. As for what he said, she just needed to listen and do as she was told. The Great Mermaid was a little surprised. This girl who wasn't even considered a female soldier always gave people surprises. Just like now, when the male soldiers who were selected from the Navy came back here, they couldn't help but ask questions like, "Why are you going into the water?" But she didn't seem to be curious at all. She completely followed the saying, "A soldier's duty is to obey orders." She didn't reject the arrangements made by the higher-ups. It wasn't that he didn't read her information. Like the Demon King, he was also suspicious of the female soldiers that the army suddenly sent over. Even before this morning, he was wondering if he should arrange a ship in advance to send the female soldiers back. Who knew that reality would teach him a lesson that left a deep impression on him and made him realize that he was too narrow-minded. Before seeing it with your own eyes, you shouldn't jump to conclusions easily. The Great Mermaid looked at the 2 people in front of her who seemed to have forgotten about her. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to carry the oxygen tank and dive as far away as possible. However, he still understood why the vice captain did this. She wanted him to lower his head first so that Yi Qian would feel better. In fact, Yi Qian didn't take the Great Mermaid's probing to heart. She had warned him and the other party immediately stopped. The matter at that time was already resolved. She wasn't petty enough to make her comrade lower his head and apologize to her. Seeing the vice captain wading into the water with her shoes on, Yi Qian, who was about to take off his shoes, smiled and followed her. The whale didn't get the order from the mermaid to leave. Seeing this, he smiled bitterly and followed the mermaid into the water. It seemed that if the mermaid didn't talk to him, the mermaid wouldn't let him leave. Their comrades naturally knew what each other was thinking. In fact, the great mermaid was also anxious. He didn't expect that Yi Qian hadn't said a word to the great whale, even though the three of them had been walking for more than 10 minutes. It was obvious how angry she was. When the great mermaid saw this, she sighed softly in her heart. Standing in the cool seawater, she said to Yi Qian, "Little Yi, this morning the great whale tested you with my intentions. He was just following my orders. I know you are angry. I will." "Vice Captain, are you mistaken about something?" Yi Qian did not let him finish. She already knew what he was going to say halfway through. She said helplessly, "I didn't take what happened this morning to heart. If you didn't mention it, I would have already put it aside. Also, I need to make it clear to you that I am not angry about this matter, and there is no such thing as anger." Her gaze was honest, and there was nothing strange on her face. Her eyes were as clear as the surrounding seawater, and she could even see her own reflection in them. That magnanimity instantly made the great mermaid realize that she had once again misunderstood. The great mermaid, who had been in the military for so many years, had never been embarrassed. But now she was blushing. Chapter 12:57. Yi Qian then said, "I came from the army, and I'm a female soldier. Suddenly coming under Demon King Li's command for training will indeed surprise everyone, because everyone knows how strict Demon King Li's training is. The difficulty is so great that even the male soldiers' expressions change. Vice Captain, I understand that you all have certain concerns. Because I understand, I've never asked what kind of training you all need me to do, or where you're taking me. I'll obey whatever arrangements the team has for me, and try my best not to bring unnecessary trouble to the team. Just like when you said that you still need to give me a test, I immediately came with you. I think I've already used my actions to tell you that my arrival won't cause any trouble to the team, nor will it cause any trouble for the team. Whatever arrangements the team has for the male soldiers, they can make the same arrangements for me. Ever since I knew that I needed to train with the amphibious frogmen, I've never thought of doing anything special in the team, and I've never thought of leaving so easily in the face of difficulties. In my heart, I've always believed that as a female soldier, I can do the same thing that the male soldiers can do. Furthermore, I'll strive to be the best, and I'll definitely not be a burden to the team, nor will I embarrass the team." After saying so much in one breath, Yi Qian's meaning was very clear. She hoped that in the upcoming training, the male soldiers in the team wouldn't look at her as if she were a female soldier. She also hoped that she wouldn't always think that she was weak because she was a female soldier, and that she needed the male soldiers to give in and take care of her. The big merman naturally understood. As Yi Qian spoke, his expression became more and more serious. When she finished speaking, the big merman knew that he had made a big mistake. He had underestimated the female soldier in front of him, who had a proud and unyielding character. Standing in the sea, he straightened his back and said in a deep voice, "I'm very sorry, Yi Qian. I apologize for my self-righteousness. Please forgive me for my ignorance." "Vice Captain, you're exaggerating. You don't know me well, so it's normal for you to misunderstand." Yi Qian smiled. Although there were some unfair things in the army, and some bad people existed, so far she had only met soldiers with iron bones and righteousness. Every single one of them was a man of indomitable spirit. Every single one of them was an indomitable spirit. She turned around and looked at the increasingly uncomfortable whale. She smiled and said, "I thought you came here to test me. I really didn't take what happened this morning to heart. Although you didn't take it to heart, I still need to apologize to you." Hearing her speak, the great whale heaved a long sigh of relief. He said slowly, I really shouldn't have tested you this morning. I'm sorry, Yi Qian. Yi Qian sometimes felt helpless against their honesty. He waved his hand and said, "You have your own responsibilities. You don't need to apologize to me. If my actions cause you to misunderstand, I should be the one apologizing to you. Why don't we stop here and not mention it again? Look, we've wasted a few minutes standing here. Let's get down to business first." Yi Qian was quick to deal with major issues, not to mention small issues that she didn't even take to heart. Seeing that the two of them looked so serious that it seemed like they couldn't get over it, she decided to wade into the water and walk forward. As soon as she took a step, the two of them immediately reacted and said in unison, "Don't go astray." Yi Qian immediately stopped and looked up at the vice captain, who was only an arm's length away from her. He said in a low voice, "There are coastal defenses below." Chapter 1258. Since this was the training ground of the Storm Brigade, how could there not be any underwater defenses? Moreover, they were heading to the training ground of the Storm Brigade. Yi Qian did not move again. She followed closely behind the Great Mermaid until they were about 5 meters away from the end of the reef. There was a natural cave before they stopped. The Great Mermaid stepped onto the reef covered with conch shells, and Yi Qian followed after her. They walked into the cave, and it felt like they were walking into the hinterland of the reef. When they walked in, they realized that there was something special about the cave. The cave was not naturally formed, but built. The entrance of the cave was low, and the direction of the cave was upward. Standing in the cave, they could hear the sound of seawater, but there was no seawater flowing in. This is one of our training rooms. After a week of training outside, all members will come here for hypoxia testing and training. Opening a steel door, the Great Mermaid pulled open the main switch. The Great Mermaid motioned for Yi Qian to come in. Later, we will simulate the oxygen concentration at high altitudes. Put on the helmet. She pointed at a transparent helmet that looked like an astronaut's, but there was a long breathing tube in front of the helmet. She motioned for Yi Qian to put it on. By reducing the oxygen concentration in the air, we will first see if you have any extreme reactions to hypoxia. After that, the Great Mermaid smiled and said, "But I think you will have no problems." Her data showed that she had undergone training on the plateau, so there was no problem with her body. She would definitely have no problems with her first hypoxia test. Yi Qian's eyes were already looking around. She had never seen the auxiliary equipment used for hypoxia training. She knew that she would have to enter this hypoxia training room in the future. As they spoke, the hypoxia test began. Just as the Great Mermaid said, Yi Qian had no problems with this test. The Great Mermaid recorded everything and said to the Great Mermaid, "You can proceed to the next test." The Great Mermaid nodded and said seriously to Yi Qian, who looked normal, "Frogmen need to be completely hypoxic for 5 minutes to pass. If you feel any discomfort later, just give us a signal. We will also follow the instructions on the equipment to ensure your safety." On the other side, Whale had already taken 2 auxiliary training instruments specially designed for ischemia tolerance and hypoxia tolerance and tied them to Yi Qian's left and right arms. Then, it pressurized the instruments to 220 millimeters of mercury so that the upper limbs would experience temporary ischemia for a few minutes. As the breathing mask was removed, Yi Qian, who was wearing a helmet, entered a completely vacuum environment. There was no transition, and he directly entered an oxygen-free environment. 2.5 minutes had passed. Yi Qian's complexion was still normal for the time being. Sitting beside the monitor that was connected to the instrument to record various parameters, the whale's eyes stared at it without blinking. He looked at the numbers that were displayed in green, and then looked at the time that had passed. It had been 3 minutes. It wasn't because Yi Qian's anaerobic test had been going on for 3 minutes. Even though her data had changed, it wasn't the limit yet. Normal people could only go on for 1 to 2 minutes at most, but she had already gone on for 3 minutes. Wait a little longer, wait a little longer. If it was still the same after 4 minutes, then she would be the one with the best results among this batch of soldiers. Someone pushed the door open and walked to the side of the whale, who had a solemn expression and a hint of excitement. "How many minutes has it been?" It was Li Jinyan's voice. The parameters only started to change after 3.5 minutes. Even though the whale spoke in a low voice, it wasn't difficult to hear the excitement in his voice. "Demon King, I bet that Yi Qian can definitely last for more than 4 minutes." Chapter 12:59. Li Jinyan was a lot calmer in the face of the whale's excitement. Although his expression was still indifferent, from the way he stared at the various parameters, it was more or less obvious that his heart wasn't as calm as his expression. Hypoxia could cause headaches, fatigue, difficulty walking, panic, shortness of breath, chest tightness, and pulmonary edema. In severe cases, it could even lead to death. Regardless of whether it was high altitude or underwater, hypoxia was a problem that humans have been unable to overcome since ancient times. And the frogmen mostly carried out underwater missions. In the selection competition, the duration of hypoxia tolerance played an extremely important role in the selection competition, and it could even decide whether to stay or leave. Li Jinyan stared at the gradually rising numbers and calmly glanced at the time. A dark light gradually condensed in his cold eyes and finally converged into a stream of light that was as bright as a winter night. "Almost there, almost there, almost there." Will did not notice the change in his expression. His eyes were fixed on the display screen, and his expression was so nervous that it was as if he was in the selection competition himself. The first beep sounded at the set time, and Will was so excited that he almost jumped out of his chair. Li Jinyan, who was standing behind him, raised his hand and pressed on his shoulder. Only then did he not lose his composure. 5 minutes, Demon King. She did it. The numbers haven't turned red yet. Whale said excitedly, as if he had discovered a treasure. His eyes were shining, as if they were bursting with light. "She has surpassed the soldiers we left behind." Very good. 5 minutes had passed. Just as Whale said, she had indeed surpassed the 24 soldiers left behind. The numbers are starting to rise. Remove the device. Li Jinyan's expression did not change at all, but when he put one hand on the table, his slender fingers tightened slightly. "Give me the results after the high CO2 reaction test. Keep an eye on it. When the numbers turn red, immediately turn off the device." Whale saw that the captain, who was younger than him, was still calm. He realized that he had lost his composure, so he cleared his throat and whispered, "It's rare to meet someone who can withstand hypoxia for 5 minutes. I will definitely be careful." As the device on his arm was removed, Yi Qian, whose upper limbs had been freed, immediately felt the locked blood rush to his arm. The heavy feeling of having a few mountains on his left and right shoulders, as well as the separation of his upper and lower limbs, instantly disappeared. Taking off her mask, Yi Qian, whose face was as red as the sunset, did not immediately open her mouth to take deep breaths. Her delicate lips slightly pouted, and she slowly and rhythmically took deep breaths. Then she let her whole body breathe in and out in sync with her breathing and slowly relaxed. The lack of oxygen for 5 minutes was like walking back from the gates of hell. Large droplets of sweat were still dripping from his back. The sweat on his forehead had gathered into small streams, dripping down his chin and onto his lapels. The big mermaid, who had been keeping watch, took a deep breath before breaking the silence in the room. "Not bad. 5 minutes and 24 seconds. Although its voice was soft, there were obvious fluctuations. It could be seen that the big mermaid was a little excited. 5 minutes. A qualified frogman's hypoxia training lasted 5 minutes. How could he not be excited? But she quickly sobered up. No matter how excited she was, she belonged to the army. Yi Qian had been counting the time in her heart. When she heard the big mermaid's words, she smiled and said, "My arm is tied to the device. Otherwise, I could have lasted 6 minutes. 6 minutes is my limit." When she was training with Principal Chan at the beach, she could only hold her breath for 2 minutes at first. Later on, when she was training at the altitude, Uncle Chun made her wear a mask for morning exercises. She wore a mask when she went down to the lake on the plateau. Even when she slept, he asked her to wear a mask. That was how she achieved her current results. Chapter 1260. 6 minutes was Yi Qian's limit, but for many people, 6 minutes of lack of oxygen underwater was enough to kill them. Big Mermaid sighed deeply in her heart again. Then she focused on the second test. No matter how good she was, she would not belong to the Navy, nor would she belong to the Storm Commandos. However, if a female soldier could surpass a male soldier, whether she belonged to her own unit or not, it was still something to be excited about. Yi Jian did not know that the Great Mermaid's heart was in turmoil. She walked out of the testing room and quickly adjusted her body to enter the High Sea 02 tolerance and adaptation test. This was a compulsory training for the frogmen and also one of the tests for the Storm Commandos. This is our C02 tolerance training form. Take a look. Big Mermaid, who accompanied and recorded the whole process, stood in the clear water and said to Yi Qian, who was already prepared, "Your breathing time will decrease by 15 seconds, but the time you can hold your breath will remain the same. We have 30 minutes of testing. You may feel a little uncomfortable, and you may even experience nausea and vomiting. There's a coral archipelago below. You need to dive to the bottom of it, which is about 15 meters from the surface. Remember, Yi Qian, we need to record your best personal score and your worst score. In 30 minutes, I want to know if your average score is passing." High CO2 was a dangerous test for diving underwater without any air source. When Yi Qian held her breath and dove to the bottom of the sea, she closed her eyes and kept her breathing tight, swimming like a fish to the bottom of the sea. The oxygen content in her blood began to decrease, and the high concentration of CO2 gradually made her body uncomfortable. Her diaphragm muscles began to twitch, telling Yi Qian that she needed to breathe, needed to rise to the surface to get oxygen. Relax, relax, the body must relax. Let the body and mind not be afraid of the gradually increasing CO2 content in the body. Listen to the sound of the water, feel the joy of the fish swimming by, and avoid being disturbed by fear and other factors. When the oxygen content in her blood reached the limit, Yi Qian quickly rose to the surface. Don't rest for too long. Otherwise, the C02 accumulated will be expelled from the body because of the long rest, and you won't be able to accumulate high C02. Once you float to the surface for more than 30 seconds, the cumulative effect of C02 will be very bad. Yi Qian, you need to take a breath within 20 seconds and dive back into the sea. Big Mermaid's strict voice kept reminding Yi Qian. He held a timer in one hand, waiting for Yi Qian to take a breath and dive back into the sea, and his expression would become more serious. 20 seconds for breath was actually quite harsh for a recruit, but he really wanted to know if Yi Qian could surpass a recruit, so he took the risk of taking a breath in 20 seconds. To the recruits, taking a breath in 20 seconds was a little dangerous, but to the Storm Commandos, taking a breath in 20 seconds was a long time. During the whole breathing process, every breath would exchange the air in the lungs. The frogmen rested for 15 seconds and immediately entered the next round of High C02. Giving Yi Qian an extra 5 seconds was what Big Mermaid finally found to be feasible and conservative after a few rounds of testing. Yi Qian dived 15 meters into the sea in one breath, held his breath for 2 minutes, and then rushed back up to rest for 15 seconds. This cycle continued for 30 minutes, and when the entire test was over, even the hardworking Yi Qian felt as if all the energy in his body had been sucked out. Big Mermaid looked at the female soldier who was completely drenched, but still maintained the pride of soldier, and then looked at the record on the form. His Adam's apple lightly moved up and down a few times. This kind of record was enough to make their comrades' jaws drop. Chapter 1261. Soon, Yi Qian's HCA02 tolerance test form was handed over to Li Jinyan, who was on the phone. Looking at the data on the form, the usually cold Demon King could not help but raise his eyebrows. A female soldier who could be appreciated by Xia Jinyuan was indeed a little different. How is it? Is she qualified enough to stay? The dignified voice of the Navy Commander-in-Chief came from the phone. He was asking about Yi Qian. Early in the morning, you didn't give the female soldiers any time to recover. Instead, you ran with the male soldiers while carrying weights and then started a high-pressure test. Li Jinyan, you're too bold. The physical fitness of the female soldiers was already worse than the male soldiers, and the test was arranged so closely. When the Navy Commander-in-Chief heard about it, he was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. Putting aside the hypoxia test, they even had to do a half-hour HCA-02 test. Did they treat the female soldiers as members of the Storm Commandos? How audacious! Didn't I tell you? Since the Army is determined to send her over, you don't have to care if she's good or not. Just keep her. You have to give face to the Army. Since she's here, we'll take her in. As for the results of the training, that's not your problem. It's up to the female soldiers to see if they put in the hard work. Don't be so strict with your requirements. She's a female soldier after all. Could it be that you expect a female soldier to be able to transform into a dragon in the sea, just like you? Wake up, Li Jinyan. No matter if she's good or not, whether she can keep up with your training, you have to King keep her. In short, she had to stay. There was no way she could be sent back. The Navy Commander-in-Chief, who did not get any response for a few minutes, took a sip of cold water and prepared to patiently give his subordinates a lesson on the ways of the world. There was nothing wrong with seeking truth from facts, but you have to look at the timing. The selection of the Storm Commandos was very strict. As the Commander-in-Chief, he did not have any objections. In fact, he absolutely agreed. After all, the selected members were going to carry out a life-threatening mission. How could they be sloppy? But Yi Qian was different. She was a soldier from the Army. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, the Navy only needed to follow the normal training process and complete the Army's requirements. There was no need to be so serious about it to avoid hurting the harmony between the two. How could Li Jinyan, who was listening quietly, not know what his commander was thinking? It was one thing to know, but it was absolutely impossible for him to do so. Regardless of whether the female soldier was from the Army or not, since she had come to his team, he had to treat her seriously. He could not just put on a show. He was being responsible for her and himself. As for whether she succeeded or not, to be honest, he was surprised when he saw the results on the form. Li Jinyan closed the form, and his thin lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. He replied indifferently, "It's higher than my expectations." Higher than expected? Was he praising Yi Qian? Did he hear wrongly? The Navy commander, who was originally prepared to persuade his subordinates, looked at him seriously and said, "Oh, it's higher than you expected. Do you think the Army has nothing better to do? Do you think they would just find a random person to stuff into your hands?" While he breathed a long sigh of relief in his heart, he said, "To be able to make you say something that's higher than your expectations, it should not be an ordinary person." Li Jinyan became the captain of the Frogman unit at a young age. It was not because of his good life and high education, but because his ability was enough to convince the others. In addition, he was very strict with himself. Every time he trained, he would advance and retreat together with his comrades. Even if the entire training style was harsh, his comrades and the team did not say a word. Everyone was convinced. Chapter 1262. It was harder than ascending to the heavens to find out whether a soldier was good or not from such a talented and capable soldier. This time, when he suddenly said something that had a hidden meaning of praise, the Navy commander's first reaction was to think that he had misheard. That's good, that's good. Finally, he didn't have to worry about him kicking people out of the reef island. After being on tenterhooks for the whole night, he finally felt relieved. He was really afraid that this guy who didn't care about his own family wouldn't give the Army any face and would just kick the female soldiers out of the reef. Now, he was finally relieved. Could it be better than what he expected? It seemed that the female soldiers sent over was really something. The Navy commander and Li Jinjun both had the same thought before this. The female soldier was outstanding in the Army, but it didn't mean that she would be equally outstanding in the Frogman unit. They both had this thought and didn't have any hope for Yi Qian at all. The Navy commander thought that as long as they could get along on the surface, he would keep her for the sake of both armies. He would just train her for 50 days and send her back to the army. That way, both sides would be happy. Now that he unexpectedly found out that the female soldier was actually not bad, the Navy commander finally felt relieved and smiled. In that case, I don't have to worry about you kicking her out in the future. Based on her current test results, I don't think she will for the time being. Li Jinyan didn't say anything to reassure the Navy commander. The test only meant that Yi Qian didn't have to be sent back for the time being. Now that it was the second elimination, if she didn't do well, she would still have to be sent back. His calm words left the Navy commander at a loss for words. He could only sigh and say, "You should at least give me some face. If you really send her back, how are you going to explain it to the army?" "Commander, Xia Jinyuan knows what kind of person I am. You don't have to worry." Li Jinyan only said this one sentence, and the Navy commander's heart calmed down a little. He then said calmly, "I will send you Yi Qian's test results later." After the Navy commander received Yi Qian's test results, he took a while to recover from his shock. With this kind of result, it was no wonder that Jinyan said it exceeded his expectations. What a pity! What a pity! It was a pity that it was someone from the army. Thanks to this achievement, the Navy commander no longer paid attention to Yi Qian. He no longer had to worry about whether she would be invited back by Li Jinyan. At noon, Yi Qian, who was not invited back, was finally officially introduced to the members of the Storm Commandos by Li Jinyan, as well as the Marine soldiers who had entered the second round of elimination. Last night, they were forced to float on the sea for a night. In the end, the 3 Marines that returned had already returned to the team. So far, including Yi Qian, a total of 28 soldiers had officially entered the 4-week Hell Week training. In the Hell Week, there was another week of extreme training. This was also a round of elimination. Only the soldiers who were physically weak would be eliminated. When the male soldiers heard that the female soldiers who were carrying weights with them today were going to enter the limit training with them, there was a subtle look in their eyes. Now that you're in my team, you have to put away your previous arrogance. Don't mention in front of me how strong you used to be or how the leaders of the army thought highly of you. I only look at your results. Those who are good can stay. Those who are bad, please go back. No one has a reason or an excuse to fish in troubled waters with me. 1 week of extreme training. I will only give you 4 hours of rest every day. The remaining 20 hours will be used for training. If anyone has any objections, you can raise them now. Chapter 1263. Every morning training assembly was the time when Li Jinyan spoke the most. It was also the time when every soldier felt the greatest psychological pressure. Demon King Li, who was dressed in martial attire, stood in front of everyone. His cold gaze swept over them, and it was as if thousands of swords were sweeping over, causing everyone to feel a chill down their backs. Yi Qian, who was standing at the end of the first row, held her head high and chest out. Her expression didn't change at all when Li Jinyan glanced at her. Her gaze was calm as she stared at the young major. Even the waves of the ocean seemed like a backdrop to her. She listened to every word he said and remembered it in her heart. Captain Xia said that Li Jinyan was a very serious and responsible soldier. Although he had a cold personality, he was very fair. Every word he said wasn't personal because he treated everyone equally. Just like what he said just now, he was just reminding all the soldiers, not just himself, who had just joined the training today. When it was time for breakfast, the selected Marines sat together and carefully discussed Yi Qian's background. Someone whispered, "Will she succeed or not? We might not even be able to stay. She's just a female soldier. Don't tire herself to the point of being hospitalized. I thought she was a secretary in the team. I didn't expect her to be like us. Didn't they say that the frogmen didn't recruit female soldiers? Why are they recruiting female soldiers now? Keep your voice down. Don't let the Demon King hear you. Whether she succeeds or not isn't up to us. It's also not up to Demon King Li. It's up to the female soldier herself. I think it's a little difficult. With less than 4 hours of rest and 20 hours of training every day, the female soldier probably won't last a week of extreme training. Like the members of the Storm Commandos, they all agreed that Yi Qian definitely wouldn't make it. Yi Qian also knew that she had become the topic of discussion among the male soldiers. Standing in front of Li Jinyan, she said calmly, "I don't have any special requests. I'll do whatever the team arranges. I'll only ask once." Faced with Yi Qian's calmness, Li Jinyan nodded slightly in secret. No special requests, and she didn't take the opportunity to make any requests. It was easier than expected. As long as it was easy, it was fine. He also didn't like having a delicate female soldier in his team who would make requests and cause trouble every other day. Yi Qian, who understood what he was implying, smiled slightly. Looking at the young major who was praised by Xia Jinyuan, he said slowly, "I'll also only say this once." Not only was it easy, but also capable and experienced. Li Jinyan really didn't say another word. He gestured for Yi Jian to return to the team and turn to leave. He was responsible for himself and every recruit. He's his heads, he was very well. He was responsible. He was responsible for himself and every recruit. A responsible man. No matter how cold he was, he wouldn't make people feel disgusted. He would only make people admire him. The male soldiers not only respected Demon King Li, but they also feared him. Yi Qian, who was always calm, didn't fear him. She didn't even look at Li Jinyan's face in the next week's extreme training. She didn't have much time to pay attention to him. The Navy's extreme training was related to water. There were too many things to learn. Even if she trained for more than 20 hours a day, she still felt that there wasn't enough time. From the obstacle course training to the boat training to the surfing training on the last day, Yi Qian wished that she could break 1 minute into 2 minutes. She was so determined that 24 hours a day was too little that it stimulated the male soldiers so much that they rushed forward excitedly. Chapter 1264. Every time Li Jinyan looked at her results, he would immediately send them to the Navy commander's desk. Therefore, the Navy commander would sigh when he received the Storm Commando's reports for 7 consecutive days. At first, Li Jinyan could only listen to them silently. From, "It's a pity that Yi Qian is from the army," to "Why don't we think of a way to recruit him into the Navy?" Looking at the slender figure who was training with the male soldiers, Li Jinyan, who was observing the second batch of eliminated soldiers, narrowed his eyes slightly. The second round of elimination would be announced tonight. A total of 10 soldiers would be eliminated. Out of the 28 soldiers, only 18 soldiers would enter the final elimination round. Although Yi Qian was a female soldier, her results were far ahead of the male soldiers. Even if he did not announce her results, the male soldiers knew in their hearts that this female soldier, who they did not take seriously at the beginning, was very impressive. Initially, the male soldiers who had complaints about his training arrangements saw that a female soldier could complete one task after another. In less than 3 days, they did not hear a single word of complaint. As a female soldier, she could complete the tasks and even did it better than the male soldiers. As male soldiers, what right did they have to complain? Will the list be announced tonight or tomorrow morning? The great merman walked over, and his gaze fell on the soldiers who were still training. When he saw Yi Qian, who did not lose to the male soldiers, he could not help but laugh. A very motivated female soldier. Her learning ability is also very strong. After a week of training, I can't help but think that she is a Navy soldier and not an Army soldier. A week had passed. Yi Qian's name had been mentioned countless times by the Storm Commandos. When Yi Qian was mentioned, every member of the Storm Commandos said that she could do it. Li Jinyan retracted his gaze. His handsome face was cold as he said, "Announce it tonight and send her away tonight. Excluding Yi Qian, we only have 27 soldiers left. If you eliminate 10 soldiers in one go, don't complain that there is too little fresh blood when the time comes." The great merman frowned slightly and reminded, "If you continue to eliminate soldiers like this, I'm afraid that the soldiers who leave will complain again. Now that Yi Qian's results are out, they can only blame themselves for being unworthy of being a man if they have any complaints." Li Jinyan's slightly cold voice came along with the sea breeze. Although it sounded indifferent, it was as cold as winter. If they really want to talk, just show them Yi Qian's report card. This move was a little too ruthless. Yi Qian was currently leading by a large margin. Any male soldier who saw this would feel ashamed. Big Shark, who had been worried that it would affect Li Jinyan's promotion, finally laughed. I think we don't have to wait for them to complain before we bring out Yi Qian's results. When we announce Yi Qian's results at night, we'll just bring them out and talk about them for a few minutes. Then, they'll have to shut up. It had to be said that having a female soldier who was stronger than the male soldiers not only made the entire team easier to manage, but also stimulated the male soldiers' fighting spirit. All of them were afraid that they would be outdone by the female soldier. Li Jinyan was surprised by the results. After 2 weeks of training, not only did he not see Qian tired, but he also showed everyone her perseverance that was as deep as the sea and her tenacity that refused to admit defeat. Although he could not be sure if the female soldier could last until the end in a week, 1 week was enough for him to see clearly that she had a fierceness that even the male soldiers could not compare to. After a while, the great merman, who had not left, suddenly sighed. We all misjudge her. This female soldier. Demon King, she's not simple. Chapter 1265. It's not the end yet. There's no need to jump to conclusions. Li Jinyan, who had remained clear-headed the entire time, did not think that Yi Qian would definitely be able to stay just because of her outstanding results. Without seeing the final results, no matter how outstanding her results were, they were only temporary. You've always been strict. I'm only asking for trouble by discussing the issue of staying or leaving with you. The Xiao took the initiative to end the topic and change the topic to boat training. Early in the morning, the boat surfing training lasted for 2 hours. They kept lifting the rubber boat ashore and pushing it down to compete with the waves, rushing ashore as fast as they could. The Xiao looked at Yi Qian, who had become the leader of Team 1, and the smile on his face deepened. On the first day of training, as a female soldier, Yi Qian had indeed suffered a lot. The male soldiers thought that she was just there to join in the fun. Furthermore, they were all angry at being trained by the Devil King. When they spoke to Yi Qian, their words were somewhat reckless. He saw this, but did not step in to stop them. He wanted to see how Yi Qian would handle it. The way to handle it was very simple. She would use her strength to speak. That night, Yi Qian made all the male soldiers shut their mouths. None of them dared to say anything bad about her. She had fought against 4 soldiers alone. She had held each of their necks with a military dagger. How could the male soldiers, who could not win even when they fought 4 against 1, still have the face to say that a female soldier was not good enough? If they had succeeded, they would not have had a military dagger held to their necks by a female soldier. She did not argue. She used her strength to stand firm. Who would dare to say that a female soldier was not good enough? Yi Qian did not know that Li Jinyan was secretly observing her. She, who was wholeheartedly focused on training, lifted the rubber boat with the male soldiers and walked towards the beach. After 2 hours of training, everyone's mouth was washed by the salty seawater until it tasted bitter. When they reached the shore, they pounced on the water bottle and gulped down water to wash away the salty taste in their mouths. 6 days of the week-long extreme training had passed. Perhaps everyone knew that the second elimination list would be released at any time. Every male soldier's expression became more and more solemn. Even when they spoke, there was a hint of ruthlessness. There's still 1 more round of surfing training. Let's rest after that. Otherwise, when the Demon King comes, we'll have to stay in the sea for half a day like the 3rd team. A male soldier said with lingering fear. He hurriedly drank a few mouthfuls of water and didn't dare to stay any longer. He asked his teammates to hurry up and finish the last set of surfing training. The boat surfing training was one of the many physical training programs that had been eliminated. After that, there would be rock carrying, obstacle surmounting training, and log carrying training. These were all daily essential training. Not only that, all the soldiers, including Yi Qian, would be doing more running, swimming, and physical training than the previous week. For example, Today, they had to complete the 6-kilometer endurance race, the steeplechase race, and the 2-kilometer swimming race. Furthermore, there was a strict time limit. Once they exceeded the time limit, they would be disqualified. There was no mercy. Yi Qian did not sleep more than 4 hours a day when she was training, because she trained for more than 20 hours a day. When the last round of surfing training ended, every team member spread out their legs and put their hands behind their backs. They straightened their backs and waited for Li Jinyan's inspection, or rather, for criticism. Li Jinyan, who had walked over from the other side, used his cold, knife-like gaze to sweep across the soldiers who had entered the last round of elimination. Even his voice was as cold as a knife. Every word he spoke sent chills down the soldiers' spines. Chapter 12:66. After breakfast, rest for an hour, and then swim 100 meters. He glanced around and didn't criticize them like he usually did. He only left a cold sentence for the soldiers who stood out from the 100 soldiers and entered the second round of elimination. Although it was only a sentence, it was like a nightmare. The soldiers who were eating breakfast didn't have the mood to do anything. The swimmers' hands had to be tied behind their backs, and their legs had to be tied. They had to rely on their body to complete the swim. This was a task that not only required good swimming skills, but also good mental fortitude. Perhaps they had all guessed that the second round of elimination had entered the most critical moment. Even though they had entered the most difficult part of the training, every soldier's expression was extremely serious. They didn't show any signs of fear. Their faces didn't show it, but when they stood on the water's surface, the corners of 2 male soldiers' mouths twitched fiercely. Their small bellies and legs also began to tremble slightly. This scene was recorded by the members of the Storm Commandos and included in their individual scores. Relax your body, just like when you swim without moving your hands and legs. Big Whale, who was tying Yi Qian's hands behind her back, reminded her softly, "Use the strength of your waist to push forward. You have to be fast. Don't relax halfway." Yi Qian smiled and joked, "Fortunately, it's only 100 meters. If I had to do 200 meters like you guys, I wouldn't have much confidence." Although Yi Qian trained with the soldiers, her identity was still special. She knew the uniqueness of Li Jinyan's team, so she could joke around with the members of the Storm Commandos. The members of the Storm Commandos also liked to chat with Yi Jian, who was stronger than the male soldiers. She was a proper female soldier from the Special Forces. Hearing this, Big Whale chuckled and replied, "You're swimming well." Our Navy's commander sighed for a long time, lamenting that you're not from Navy. The 28 soldiers had their hands and legs tied. They were waiting for the whistle to blow before diving into the water one by one and diving for 100 meters. It was time to test their swimming skills and mental fortitude. A sharp whistle sounded. Yi Qian turned into a fish. Her speed was extremely fast, and her diving posture was extremely graceful. She dove into the water without any hesitation. The entire surface of the water began to boil, and a series of plop sounds could be heard. 28 figures jumped into the water. The Storm Commandos who were holding stopwatches had already started counting down. They were only waiting for the soldiers to finish the 100-meter dive before recording the time they spent on the score sheet. Just like what the whale had said, diving with both hands and feet tied depended on the strength of the waist. Yi Jian was not the best swimmer, but she was definitely one of the most flexible. Coupled with her high C02, she had good endurance and adaptability. Even though she was not a swimmer, she still managed to squeeze into the top 3. She's the first one to jump into the water, Demon King. I bet she'll definitely squeeze into the top 3. Big Whale whispered to Li Jinyan, unable to hide the excitement in his voice. At this rate, we can definitely recruit a female frogman into our team. Demon King, why don't you consider snatching someone from the tiger's mouth? Not only did the great whale think so, but so did the naval commander. Li Jinyan glanced at his comrade. How do you plan to snatch it? Will you step in? I think the commander has this idea. Unfortunately, it won't work, Big Whale said sadly. He saw that some soldiers had already surfaced from the water. Then, he saw Yi Qian following closely behind. His eyes lit up, and he was so excited that it was as if he was the one who had been training. He could barely suppress the excitement in his voice. Top 3, top 3. Top 3 indeed. Chapter 1267. Yi Qian did not know that she had won second place. She only knew that if she did not swim with all her might, she would probably sink to the bottom of the water and would not be rescued in a short time. If she wanted to survive and not be drowned by the water, she had no other choice but to swim with all her might. At the same time, she had to thank Demon King Li for being merciful and not letting them swim in the seawater filled with seaweed. Otherwise, it would have been even more dangerous. When she could finally emerge from the water and breathe heavily, Yi Qian had a lingering fear that she had escaped death. After a few years of training, this was the first time she had felt this way, especially when she subconsciously wanted to move her hands when she fell into the water. However, both her hands and legs were tied. That sudden feeling of fear instantly overwhelmed her. Even though she had a good mental fortitude, she still panicked for a few seconds. Fortunately, she reacted in time and immediately used the strength of her waist to swim. Otherwise, she might have really sunk to the bottom of the water. You struggled underwater, and the skin on your legs has been broken. The member of the Storm Commandos who untied her hand smiled and said, "In the future, there will be more underwater training that will torture both your mind and body. Not only will your hands and legs be tied, but you will also be tied to an oxygen tank. Little Yi, when that time comes, you will know what it means to swim as fast as possible with all your might." They even had to tie an oxygen tank. Yi Qian's scalp went numb just by listening to it. I finally understand why the Demon King is so strict. If he's not strict, something will definitely happen during training. The Demon King is cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. He is strict with all of you because he is responsible for all of you. Look at the last few. All of them choked to the point of coughing out their lungs. If he is not strict and something happens to them, he will feel worse than anyone else. Yi Qian did not doubt the truth of what he said. After a week of training, she could indeed see that Li Jinyan was a cold on the outside but warm on the inside. He was a responsible and serious soldier. His seriousness and responsibility were not only for his life, but also for the entire country. This was a soldier who deserved everyone's respect. It's not over yet. Go lie on the beach for an hour. Without even checking the severity of the injury, the team member immediately reminded Yi Qian to move on to the next part of the training. He had to lie flat on the beach with his head facing the sea and let the waves hit his body. Furthermore, he had to lie in a place where the waves could hit his head and not just his body. This was surfing training. Its purpose was to weed out those who lacked perseverance. Yi Qian untied the ropes on her feet and ran over to the beach without even looking at her own results. This was not a team competition, but an individual elimination. She had no way of helping the soldiers who were choking on water and coughing violently. Water ability and mental toughness were reflected one by one in the bondage swimming competition, which took up the most important positions in the second round of elimination. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the last day of the Hell Week training ended. The soldiers who returned from the seaside had even changed their running movements. They were like old men who had severe rheumatism. Their limbs were so stiff that they could only walk like robots with every step they took as if their joints had malfunctioned. Yi Qian knew that there was not a single part of her body that was unharmed. Her body was red and swollen from being soaked in the sea. Even the most basic movements were excruciating. However, the finish line was right in front of her. She could only grit her teeth and persevere. There was no way out. Yi Qian had always been cruel to herself until Li Jinyan called out a list of names that did not include her name. After a week of extreme underwater training, Yi Qian slowly sat down on a beach under Li Jinyan's signal and tried to calm her trembling feet. Chapter 1268. The basic training was finally over. The next step was combat diving. The eyes of the remaining male soldiers were slightly red. It had not been easy. They had endured until who knew how many layers of skin had been peeled off. The male soldiers who left did not complain. They were not even as good as the female soldiers. How could they dare to complain? The 3 soldiers who returned from the first batch went through several rounds of elimination training. In the end, only one of them remained. The 2 who left did not look unconvinced like they did in the first round. Instead, they took the initiative to admit their shortcomings and let down Demon King Li's trust in them. At that time, the setting sun was just right. The bright red sun hung low at the end of the sea, using its last rays to send off the young soldiers who had lost with their backs straight. Someone started singing a military song. The male soldiers who were originally sitting down helped each other stand up. They used a loud military song to send off their comrades who were leaving. Steel needs to be forged. Swords need to be sharpened. Spears need to be wiped. Soldiers love the military training ground, sweat blooming the heroic flowers. Practice, practice, practice. Let's practice wrestling, hey. Let's practice grappling. Remember the sacred mission in our hearts. Love the army. Practice martial arts to protect the country. The soldiers who were left sang. The soldiers who were leaving sang. The Love the Army, practice martial arts song accompanied the most beautiful sunset to send off their beloved comrades. While Yi Qian was singing the military song, Ying in the provincial capital was also making use of the time to sing the military song. She had made up her mind to join the army. Under Yi Jifan's selection, she decided to enlist in the military arts. She had a foundation in singing and dancing. She could also play the piano well. In addition, she was 165 centimeters tall. Her temperament and appearance were not bad. As long as there were no accidents, enlisting in the army would not be a big problem. In order to let his daughter Yi Ying enlist in the army, Yi Jifan, who wanted her to enter the capital's political group, had already started to run around. He was trying to make arrangements for his daughter to have a good future. Ying, are you done? Sun Dongqing's urging voice came from outside the room. Tonight, the family of 3 had invited a guest whose family had connections in the capital for dinner. As the main character, Ying was still tidying up her room and had not come out. Sun Dongqing saw that it was already 6 o'clock. She was afraid of being late and leaving a bad impression. She could not help but urge her daughter. Hurry up, it's already 6 o'clock. We're supposed to arrive at 7 o'clock, so we have to be there 10 minutes earlier so as not to be rude. In the room, Ying looked at herself in the mirror. She nodded in satisfaction as she looked at herself in the mirror. She was wearing an aqua blue knee-length princess dress. She smoothed her beautiful black hair before opening the door. My family has a daughter who has just grown up. The 19-year-old Yi Ying is indeed a pretty girl in terms of appearance and temperament. Sun Dongqing couldn't stop smiling when she walked out after tidying herself up. Yes, my Ying is so beautiful. Look at her small mouth and big eyes. She's really beautiful. Ying smiled and twirled in front of Sun Dongqing. She raised her chin and said arrogantly, "How can I embarrass you and Dad?" She heard that the guests tonight were not ordinary people. There was even a diplomat in the family. If she didn't clean herself up, how could she be worthy of her family's painstaking efforts? Once she entered the army, she would definitely let that wretched girl, Yi Qian, have a look. Yi Ying, who left home with great ambitions, followed her parents to the most famous restaurant in the provincial capital. She stood upright and had a smile on her face. She was reserved and polite as she waited for the guests to arrive. Come. Brother Qin, this way please, this way please." Someone outside the private room pushed open the half-closed door. Then, the person who spoke walked in and said to Yi Jifan, who had already stood up, "Director Yi, the guests are here. You have to treat them well." Chapter 1269. When the door was fully opened, Yi Jifan saw a young man in a suit and leather shoes walking in with the middleman, Old Jiang, the head of an industrial company in the provincial capital. "Director Yi, this is the son of the Qin family in the capital. You know the Qin family, right? Brother Qin is the son of the Qin family." Old Jiang respectfully invited Mr. Qin over and only introduced him to the Qin family. He did not mention anything about Mr. Qin himself. Old Jiang was in his early 30s and met Yi Jifan at a banquet. He inadvertently found out that director Yi wanted to send his daughter to the Beijing government regiment to be an art soldier. He remembered that he had heard rumors that director Yi was likely to be promoted to be the second in charge of the provincial construction. He wanted to enter the real estate business, so he took advantage of the opportunity when the Qin family came to the provincial capital to celebrate grandfather Chao's birthday to act as a middleman. As for whether or not he could persuade the Qin family to help him, it was not up to him alone. It depended on the progress of the banquet. But old Jiang secretly glanced at the corner and felt that there shouldn't be a problem. Director Yi had a beautiful daughter, and Qin Yi was famous for being a womanizer. If he really took a fancy to Director Ye's daughter, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for him to get her into the Beijing political group? Yi Jifan clearly saw the young man that old Jiang had brought over. Not only was he too young, he even had a frivolous look on his face. Before he even opened his mouth, Yi Jifan's heart sank. Yi Ying stood up and looked at the so-called nobleman. She could not help but frown. A diplomat? Is this what a diplomat looks like? Why does he look so unreliable? Yi Ying looked at the so-called young diplomat, and the diplomat, Qin Yi, did not avoid looking at Yi Ying. Brother-in-law Jiang really didn't lie. The little girl looked fresh and lively. Her almond-shaped eyes were big and bright, revealing a charming charm. Also, with that slender waist, she was worthy of being a dancer. At first glance, one could feel her tenacity. In the capital, Qin Yi was famous for being a playboy. He was proficient in eating, drinking, and playing. His appearance had inherited the Qin family's usual gentle and handsome appearance. His clothes and speech were all good. Therefore, he was particularly popular with women. When Ying first met Qin Yi, she was also deceived by his gentle and handsome appearance. She thought that he was really a gentle diplomat. When she saw him looking at her with a slight smile, she hurriedly returned to smile with her face burning hot. She then shyly lowered her head, her actions revealing the coquettishness of a girl. Unknowingly, Qin Yi's heart felt as if it was being scratched by a cat's paw. Brother Qin, this is the director Yi that I mentioned to you before. Old Jiang was seriously trying to pull strings. From his words, one could tell that he was very respectful to this young master Qin from the capital. Qin Yi, who had been arrogant and haughty just a second ago, suddenly smiled and said politely, "Nice to meet you, Director Yi. I'm Qin Yi." As he spoke, his eyes never left Yi Ying. "Hello, young Master Qin. I didn't expect to be able to directly invite young Master Qin over tonight. Old Jiang really gave me a big surprise." Qin Yi took the initiative to stretch out his hand. Yi Jifan hurriedly stretched out his hand as well. He did not want to be impolite. He also happened to block Qin Yi's gaze from the corner of his eye. He smiled and said, I'm sorry. Please take a seat." No matter how big the other party's background was, or whether the matter entrusted to him was reliable or not, he could only take one step at a time. Old Jiang would not dare to casually find someone to pretend to be young Master Qin to deceive him. "I'll go and see if Grandfather Chao has arrived." Old Jiang stood up, intending to leave some space for Qin. "If Grandfather Chao arrives, I'll come and find you immediately." Qin Yi could not wait for him to leave. He smiled and said, "Thank you, brother-in-law. Today was Grandfather Chao's 80th birthday. As a member of the Qin family, how could Qin Yi be absent?" Yi Jifan's eyes flickered and he looked embarrassed. He apologized. "I've troubled young Master Qin to take the time out of his busy schedule to come here. How about this? If young Master Qin is still in the provincial capital tomorrow night, I'll host another banquet to thank young Master Qin. The first time might not work, but the second time will be more likely to make it happen." Chapter 1271. Old Jiang was amused when he heard this. Officials were different. They knew how to make dinner parties better than businessmen. He laughed and tried to pull the strings again. "Brother Qin, you can have some fun in the provincial capital. You don't have to rush back to the capital." He had already opened the door of the private room. Yi Fan, who had stood up to send him off, walked over. "Thank you for your hard work, old Jiang. If Elder Chow hasn't arrived yet, you'll have to come back and have a few drinks with us." As he spoke, he approached old Jiang and whispered, "Thank you, old Jiang. Director Yi, you're being too polite." The bald old Jiang touched his forehead out of habit. He looked at Qin Yi, who was chatting with Sun Dongqing, and quickly reminded him, "Director Yi, Mr. Qin's family is a big shot in the capital. Our Jiang family and the Qin family are in-laws. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to invite him. He's also a forthright person. I think you can talk to him. Why don't you strike while the iron is hot and tell him that your niece wants to enter the capital's political regiment? To tell you the truth, although the Qin family is a diplomatic family, they know only high-ranking military officers. If the Qin family agrees, you can enter any regiment you want." The reason why Yi Fan chose such a high-end place to entertain guests was naturally because he had investigated the situation of old Jiang's family. At this moment, he naturally understood that old Jiang was telling the truth. Yi Fan glanced at Qin Yi, who was speaking politely to his wife. His smile deepened as he said, "Old Jiang, if my daughter's matter is settled, your matter will also be settled." On the other side, Sun Dongqing flattered, "Mr. Qin is young and promising, as expected of a noble family. Only the Qin family can cultivate such a talent like Mr. Qin. Unlike us small families, we don't have the ability to send our children to higher places. We can only be anxious." Sun Xueqing didn't have so many scruples when speaking. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, she still hadn't mentioned her daughter's matter. She couldn't help but feel anxious. She simply said it directly. Anyway, the other party knew why she invited him. For the sake of her daughter's future, Sun Dongqing lowered herself for the first time to flatter a young man. "We're old and don't have the ability to pave a path for our children. Even if we want our daughter to join the military, our hair will turn white. Director Yi, your wife has already talked about business. I won't disturb you and Brother Qin. I'll come back later." Old Jiang heard this. He guessed that there might be some shady deals. He knew that he wouldn't stay and would come back in half an hour. As for whether Grandfather Chow was coming or not, it was just a cover. It was Old Master Chow's 80th birthday. It did not matter if Qin Yi appeared or not. 2 silhouettes walked past the open door of the private room. Then another person came back and looked straight into the private room. Yi Fan was about to speak when he saw the figure walking over. His eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but purse his lips tightly. He met an acquaintance, Principal Chow of the provincial first high school. Principal Chow didn't have any intention of catching up with Yi Fan. He walked back to the door and patted old Jiang, who was talking. "Why are you here? Yu Xiang is looking for you. She wants you to go to the door and greet the guests." Old Jiang, who was suddenly patted on the back, was already shocked. When he heard Principal Chow's voice, he was so scared that his heart tightened. He turned around and replied with a stiff face, "Hello, second uncle. I ran into an acquaintance, so I came over to say hello." Chapter 1272. Principal Chow raised his eyes and smiled at Yi Fan. He then turned to old Jiang and said, "Yu Xiang can't handle it alone. Go and take care of her." Yu Xiang, surnamed Chow, was old Jiang's wife and Principal Chow's niece. Yi Fan's heart was in turmoil. The relationship between old Jiang and Principal Chow was uncle and nephew. He had investigated old Jiang's family and knew that his wife was old Master Chow's niece, but he didn't know that Principal Chow was also a member of the Chow family. Old Jiang did not dare to stay any longer. He secretly gave Yi Fan a look as he walked out and gently closed the door of the private room. Just as he calmed his mind and looked up, he was so frightened by the figure that was only 3 steps away from him that he almost fainted. Qin Xiu, the real young master of the Qin family. Cold sweat gradually appeared on his back. Fortunately, second uncle didn't go in and didn't see Qin Yi sitting inside. Fortunately, Qin Xiu didn't come with him. "Uncle, my mother is here. I'll go first." Under the bright crystal lights, the tall and handsome Qin Xiu stood there like a jade carving, attracting the gazes of all the guests who came and went. They were all attracted by his noble aura. The real young master of the Qin family was right in front of him. Old Jiang secretly wiped away the cold sweat in his heart. Although he was related to the Chao family, he really wasn't related to Qin Xiu. He didn't dare to say a word. He brushed past Qin Xiu's shoulder and quickly left. Principal Chao noticed that old Jiang's expression was a little strange, but he didn't think too much about it. He just thought that it was a little awkward for him to bump into a businessman and an official. However, because the official was Yi Jifan, Principal Chao, who didn't have a good impression of him, secretly frowned. He planned to find some time later to remind his niece's husband. Seeing his nephew Qin Xiu walk towards the stairs, Principal Chao, who was walking up the stairs, smiled and said, "Your mother rushed over in such a hurry." After dinner, she rushed back to the capital. She didn't even stay for a night. "I'm afraid your grandfather will scold her. I'll go remind her and let her coax your grandfather more." Yi Jifan and Qin Yi left together, not noticing that the door of the private room was slowly closing behind them. Yi Jifan returned to his seat and chatted with Qin Yi for a while. Inadvertently, the topic of their conversation shifted to Principal Chao. "The Principal Chao you mentioned is my second uncle. My grandfather has 2 sons and 2 daughters. My second uncle is the third." Qin Yi had always liked to keep in touch with the Chao family. Whenever Qin Xiu's relatives were close to him, he would also keep in touch with them. Hearing this, Yi Jifan's heart tightened. He took a small sip of the white wine. In that case, it was good that he was cautious. When Principal Chao didn't give him any face and asked Ying to leave, he suppressed the anger in his heart. Fortunately, he restrained himself. Otherwise, he would have become enemies with the Chao family. Everyone in the room was talking about Yi Ying's intention to enlist in the Beijing political corps. Qin Yi glanced at the bank card that Sun Dongqing had just mentioned and whistled in his heart. It was interesting to have dealings with officials. They all knew how to give gifts. Without any hesitation, he took the bank card and smiled confidently. "This matter is easy to handle. Director Yi, prepare your daughter's information for me as soon as possible. Based on my experience, with Director Ye's daughter's temperament, it won't be a problem for her to enter and stay in Beijing. You said that Yi Jifan wants to send his daughter to the Beijing political group?" Principal Chao took the opportunity to look at his nephew's son-in-law coldly. Even his voice was cold. "You don't have the ability, yet you dare to take on the porcelain job? That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.